Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission held on Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. I'd like to open the meeting at 7:30. May we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And may I have roll call, please?
Mr. Carpenter. Mr. Fitzer.
Here.
Mr. Colbert.
Here.
Mr. Kucera.
Here.
Mr. Nishai. Ms. Redmond.
Here.
Mr. Scott.
Yep.
Mr. Solomon.
Here.
Mr. Twidell.
At this point, I'd like to welcome our two new commissioners here, Mr. Mike Tywell and Evan Carpenter. Would you like to say anything to the people out there? A brief history of what your background is, or?
I'm a business owner in Clausen with a business and the DDA TwiFit Personal Fitness. I've been a business owner in the city for the last 8 years, and I have 17 years of contracting experience, working with signs and signage, and dealing with cities and permitting and ordinances and everything. And I hope that my experience can help out the community.
Oh, thank you. Welcome aboard. I think we can use you. Evan, anything in the?
Lifelong Clausen resident, business owner as well in the city, and been developing real estate for the last 15 years. So
Good.
looking forward to helping out the city and seeing it grow.
Very good. Welcome aboard. Agenda item number 4 is approval of the agenda. That's the approval of the agenda that we have printed in front of us. Does anyone want to change anything or add to it, subtract from it? Seeing no changes, I will approve the agenda as it stands. Excuse me, we'll move on to the approval of the regular meeting minutes from August 8th, 2023, our last meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from August 8th, 2023.
Support.
2023.
Support.
I have a motion and support. Everybody's happy with it. I'll take roll call for it.
Mr. Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Solomon.
Yes.
Mr. Twidell.
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer.
Yes.
Mr. Colbert.
Yes.
Mr. Kucera.
Yes.
And Ms. Redmond.
Yes.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 6 is public discussion, items not on the agenda. Is anyone here from the public wishing to speak? Seeing none, I will then close public discussion. And we'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is a discussion of an ordinance amendment regarding screening walls for the RM1 projects. I think our Gibbles and Webster will start us out here.
Hello, good evening, Planning Commission. I'm happy to discuss this. I think Joe is planning on being here, but I'm happy to just go ahead with the screening wall discussion. So I know we talked about this last meeting, and it sounded like you were interested in just seeing what this might look like in ordinance form with the screening wall modification or amendment. So really all we would say is we'd provide a provision in the RM1 and RM2 and PUD zoning districts that there be a 6-foot screening wall between any abutting residential districts. So the additional question in the memo there was whether you want to require a fence for non-conforming residential uses not located in R1 or R2 districts. That would mean, I think that really the point of that last additional question is do you want to screen the walls from simply residential zoning districts or residential zoning districts and residential uses? And I think that's because there's a difference, there could be something that is residentially used, but in a commercial zoning districts. So it's, do you want to just screen from zoning districts or do you want to screen from residential zoning districts and residential zoning uses? So I think that's what that additional
It doesn't
question
mean
means.
that like things that are presently non-conforming, like grandfathered already in there, that we would then go back and.
No,
refer
that's not
those?
what that means because
Okay,
at least to my knowledge, right, Nick? We're not trying to make. There's certain protections that non-conforming sites and non-conforming uses have. So if something's built if there's an existing multifamily residential in RM1 or RM2, I don't think it's the commission or the planning and zoning administrator's authority to require a wall be built after the fact. I think that second sentence is simply referring to the abutting use. Whether or not the abutting use could be a non-conforming use where it's commercially zoned but residentially used. So that second question is, do you want to require a wall on the subject multifamily use abutting a non-conforming residential use?
so a use that's currently used as residential, but not zoned as a residential?
Exactly, yeah. As the abutting use.
Okay,
Are
Does that make
you
sense?
asking like if we would, if this ordinance gets approved, that existing properties that would have to go put a 6 foot instead of 4 foot if there's already 4.5 foot wall there? I guess could you
right, like
rephrase-
on a non-conforming, like.
Right, so currently, right?
Right,
So think of it a little bit like this. So the planning commission just reviewed the sign ordinance. And so let's say the amount of square footage went down. We're not going to have existing businesses with, 60 square feet of sign. That was when it was approved. That was fine. We're not going to make them go smaller. And so any ordinance changes for future projects, future development. And so the next time there's a situation like this, if it happens again, and there's a multifamily building up against residential, the height requirement would not be 4.5 foot, it would be 6 foot.
okay. And does
Does that-
this change anything in regards to the materials listed for our wall?
I think it's simply the height requirement.
It's simply wall, so whatever wall has formerly been.
Well, because I know that there
Used
was a
as-
discussion, at
If
least
they-
from my understanding, that the wall was continuously crumbling.
If they achieve the heights, they can do it, I believe, with either cinder block, brick masonry, or vinyl. But our preference is to go with something that lasts.
They can do vinyl?
I believe they can. We tried that at in bars.
I guess, is this a trick question? Because the additional question is referring to a fence and we're talking about a wall.
Yeah, that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that question is, and Joe walked in at the perfect time, so we'll let him get settled in and he'll hopefully clear that up.
We're talking about Barb's, behind Barb's Pizza, they're putting a house
Yeah.
there.
But I'm thinking more so of the 3 residential homes on 14. They wanted to do vinyl.
Yeah.
But that would be a variance. I thought that was going to be a variance.
I believe they can get away with the vinyl.
Oh, okay.
Our preference is that we don't do that,
Okay, gotcha.
just for the lifespan of it.
A wall.
Is that the same with commercial butting up to residential?
Anything for my understanding. But I don't know. Okay.
Hey, everybody.
Here's the answer.
Uh,
Welcome.
sorry to be late. I was at a school open house and
I just think, just taking a step back while you're getting settled too. Can we focus on the first portion before we talk about the additional question? I just don't want to get off track. So I think we should focus on the reason it was brought up was because of a recent,
Mhm.
they talked about bringing those 6 foot wall. And I feel like I am, and this body that was present at the time was in support of moving it from 4.5 feet to 6 feet. The only question I had, and maybe Joe, when you get settled here, was why it was just listed for RM1 and RM2 or HUD districts.
so
Because I'm just looking at the zoning map and trying to determine, all the residential area kind of surrounding that and how it may or may not be impacted
Yeah.
by this change.
so that is the question, isn't it? Right? Why was it different in these districts versus everything else? Because the standard specifically says it's to screen, parking lots from neighboring uses, and there's no difference between a parking lot for an apartment complex and a shopping center, physically speaking. time wise, activity wise, yeah, okay, there's probably a difference, but in terms of what you're looking at, it's the same thing. It's pavement with lines on it. And I don't know. I think there was probably back when these two standards were put in place, there was probably some sort of thought that, well, it's multifamily, it's residential, so it's a little less, lighter impact, transitional use, but at the same time, it is still, parking areas and, everything that goes along with parking areas. So I guess that's something to think about. And then, yeah, Andy did have the correct interpretation of my question there about requiring fences for non-conforming residential uses that aren't in R1 and R2. So if you've got, for instance, like we had with the recent site plan where you've got the houses next door, they're not zoned R1 or R2, they're zoned multifamily. Do we want some kind of, fence there between the new development and the existing house, the existing single family house?
So there is a distinction between putting a vinyl fence in a 6-foot block wall. You're saying, right? Okay,
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, well, so I said fence in the memo and yeah, as opposed to a wall. That's right. A block wall versus a fence.
so the materials will change between a 4-foot or 4.5 foot and a 6-foot, right? Are we requiring,
Would we allow both materials in this case?
Well, I think what you've got, you have a couple different situations that you're looking at. You have the typical wall that's required. We know that's required between the RM1, RM2 or PUD and an R1, R2 district. That right now is required to be a wall. That standard can be waived down to a fence or other combination of screening materials by the planning commission if it feels it's appropriate. And that's got to be 4.5 feet tall. Right now, you don't really have to have something if there's a non-conforming house next to what you're building in that district. So if you're like we have on 14 Mile, where you have an RM1 district, that's a multifamily district. You have single family houses in that district. You build a little apartment complex. The house next door doesn't have a fence next to it. So that's kind of a separate question. Do we want to require something there? And if so, would it be a wall or a fence? And how tall would it be? And it's probably going to be as tall as the other one, whatever we decide. I think most people at the last meeting, we only had 5, were in favor of 6 feet rather than the current 4.5 foot standard. But I think you would probably stick to that.
but Joe,
And the-
let's
in the
say
other
we're using
property
the
line.
scenario of 14 Mile. That would eventually lower to, it would look odd to a house to have a 6-foot block wall straight to the property line or to the sidewalk.
Mhm.
Would we ease that down and
Well, you do it like you're required to with residential fences. Yeah. So when
but
resident,
it's not technically residential, right? It's a non-conforming residential, so
right.
I hate to like get way off track. But like, is that something that still would be required? Or no?
You'd have to come down because the reason that so there's a couple reasons that you come down in the front. So when you get to a front yard, first of all, I don't know that you would necessarily require the fence or wall to continue into the front yard. But if you did have it continuing into the front yard, you would want it to come down so that you're not ruining people's sight distances when they're trying to come out of a driveway. You want people to be able to have a clear view, especially if they're on 14 Mile, you want them to be able to see well down the road because it's a relatively fast road. Yeah, but I don't know that you would necessarily continue it beyond the front line of the house.
So is that already built into the ordinance that it stops at the frontage of the
So in residential districts, yeah, the fence doesn't come in front of the house. So if you're on a street that's zoned, or everything's zoned R1. And you've got a bunch of single family homes and everybody's got a fence, those fences aren't coming in front of the front line of the
Right, but,
house.
but how does that look in a non-conforming residential home? Zone for RM to RM1,
Sure, you probably just bring it up to wherever the front of the house is.
but that's not written in the ordinance anywhere, right?
No, it's not right
If it's written
now.
In the
Yeah,
ordinance, what do we require?
nothing right now.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah, so it's, do we want to put a requirement in place is the
right,
question.
okay,
I mean, I feel like we're went down a little bit of a rabbit hole because of this question. I mean, I think if we, so. That question aside, I mean, that feels to me like a completely separate issue. What we need to decide on is whether or not, based on, the last review we did. It felt like all of us agreed, I thought, that it seemed like, geez, why is it 4.5 required? It should just be 6. We all thought, oh, it should be 6, right? So I think we should move forward with fixing what we identified as a problem. And if we want to continue to discuss whether or not a current residential that's non-conforming needs to have a wall that's not required currently between it and a new construction, commercial construction, we can debate that separately. But what I feel like what we should be talking about on the table first is, do we raise it? Do we raise the current requirement from 4.5 to 6?
well, I guess my reply to that would only be that. The answer to my questions would help me vote on whether or not I want to up it to 6. If I'm gonna have the neighbor that came in here for the 14-mile properties, he's still the lone house left there. If he's got a 6-foot black wall going up to the sidewalk, that's gonna affect him in a way, and I don't know how.
Right, but this change wouldn't change that.
Yes, it would.
Well, no, he's correct. This change, if we
Oh.
just take the 4.5 to 6,
Oh,
that
okay.
doesn't change it.
Got you.
It's
Sorry, then, I
it's so,
apologize.
I think let's decide if we're gonna do that and then we'll talk about the rest.
Sure, okay.
Yeah. So,
Then.
yeah, so are we going from 4.5 to 6? That's the first question. Are we doing that? And it seems like the answer is yes. I'm not seeing any dissent from that.
Should we motion that?
Accept a motion that
Yeah,
I move to approve the zoning ordinance amendment from section 5.14 to require 6-foot high wall between RM1, RM2, or PUD districts and any residential.
motion support, I think we've hashed it pretty much. Can we go with roll call on, please?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, who seconded that? Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you. All right. Mr. Colbert. Mr. Kucera, Ms. Redmond,
yes,
Mr. Scott,
Yes,
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Twidell,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're still on the wall subject. We passed that. That's a good deal as far as I'm concerned. What does the ordinance say on walls? We talked about this before, between parking lots and streets. Don't we try to screen that off?
Yeah, that's the, we were talking about it a couple meetings ago, the little knee wall.
Yeah, I thought that came up, and I thought the height requirement was something like 30 to 36 inches.
Yeah, between 30 and 36 inches.
It's less.
Is it, was it
Less.
less than 30 inches?
Less than 30? I would-
30 and 36. I read it wrong.
Yeah, it's 30 to 36, yeah.
30 to 36, that's what I kind of thought I read someplace, but walking downtown here, I walk over to the Ace development. They have their nice, beautiful Ace parking lot, and they have a little wall on the side street there. It's far from 3 foot tall. It's a very short wall.
Is it? Yeah, I haven't,
Looks like maybe 2.5 foot, and I don't know if that,
that's along Bowers you're talking about?
and the city parking lot also has the same ice wall on it. They replace it. It's a very, very small knee wall. I don't think it's a great deal, but I don't know what our ordinance was at the time as they were doing that.
Yeah,
I know they had to replace them when they were doing construction.
yeah.
It would seem
Um,
like you're screening for headlights, right?
Yeah,
So you don't
that's-
want it at least as high as
Yeah.
the headlight.
Of course, nowadays some headlights are
Now
like
you
4
got-
feet off the
Right.
ground. But, yeah, I would have to look at that wall and see how tall it is, but, yeah, I think
Okay,
30,
I just
36
thought
inches,
the
what I would have
ordinance
expected
said
it to
30
be.
to 36, so I'll look at that again.
Yeah, it does say 30 to 36. That's what it's in the ordinance. All right, so we've made the decision on the 6 feet versus 4.5 feet.
Yep.
Now we can talk about that other question. You've got your single family use in the district that's no longer R1, R2. Do we want something down that property line when the, if a commercial use goes in, you have to have it already. It's only for the multifamily uses that we need to worry about whether or not we want to have something there. And the reason I put fence in the memo is that, well, it is a multifamily district. It probably one day will become something other than a single family home. A fence is a lot easier to work with than a wall if that happens in the future. So, I was thinking maybe the requirement isn't quite as steep for that property line as it is for an R1 or R2 district, which we know is going to be single family well into the future.
I think it has a softening effect too for a residential existing. But I guess I don't live there, right?
All right.
So was your thought to keep it beginning at 6 foot to a certain point up to the front of the home, the building, like when you were, I'm just curious on.
Yeah,
on
so
that.
I think, so what we have right now, like, let's say you have a corner, like a commercial corner, and then you go around the corner and you've got houses facing the side street. That wall has to be 6 feet up to where the house is, and then it steps down toward the street so that you don't have a blinding effect on the residential driveways. You can see over the wall, and it steps down toward the sidewalk. And by the time you get to the sidewalk, it's got to be down to 30. I think it's at 30 to 36 inches. So I think you'd either stop it at the front of the house, or you would step it down from 6 feet to that 36-inch height.
That can be a drastic drop right there, huh?
Mhm.
If you only have 5 feet to work with between the front of the house and but I'm sure if you had a home there, you would want that 6 feet
Sure.
screening, right?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like we should keep it the same as what it is for other situations, right? So you have a residential non-conforming home next to a new commercial build. Require the same thing that you would require.
Well, we do for commercial, it's
I'm
multifamily
sorry,
that,
commercial.
yeah.
So you get commercial, what you require for commercial now should be applicable to a multifamily construction. Yeah, I guess it's what
I
I'm
would
saying.
agree with that, yeah.
You know,
It's a,
there's really no difference to me in my mind as a homeowner. To me, it's still a commercial building, whether it's multifamily or an actual business doing business, it's still commercial to me.
in the way it's used.
Right.
And we ran into that problem a couple of years back here, but the Westgate Shopping Center up there, where the Social Security offices is. They have a wall along the whole back end of their property. I think it's well over 6 feet. It's a cinder block wall. They repaired it a few times. And that's the one that got run into here a while back. There's still caution tape around there. I don't know who hit it or how they did it. At the time, it came up the full height all the way up to the sidewalk.
Mhm.
So if you drove through their lot and you came up, you couldn't see a bicycle coming.
Right, that's the issue with that.
We had to chop it down and make it some
Yeah.
vision area there.
And if you can't see an adult on a bicycle, you certainly can't see a child on a tricycle.
Yeah.
So you do definitely have to bring the wall down.
So we can ordinance a 6-foot wall, but if there are places where vision says you can't put a 6 foot.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, that kind of makes me nervous, right? Because there are homes that are maybe 4 feet from the sidewalk even, and or 5 feet, like, so I would want to make sure that that's number one priority, right? Like, we want to make sure it's secure, but I don't know how fast they have to drop that to the 36 inches. If it can be 6 feet and then 36 inches, or,
I mean, it's, we have a 25-foot front setback and that's the typical. At 25 feet, the wall has to drop because
at
that's when
25
you're getting into the point where you've got your vision triangle. You know, you've got to have 25 by 25. So basically you have a 25 by 25 square, cut it in a half diagonally, and that's the area that needs to have clear vision above 36 inches and below 8 feet. In order to give you adequate sight distance when you're coming out of a driveway, to avoid hitting whoever's coming, whether they're on the sidewalk or on the street.
So you would think that that would automatically preempt our 6 foot potential?
But I would have to look at how it's worded right now. We'd either add it to the language here or it would already control. I'd have to look and see if it would already be applicable. It might already be applicable, but at 25 feet, it's got to go down.
So would we feel good about Joe bringing like verbiage back on that
I think
particular
so.
ordinance?
I can add that to it.
Sure.
Do you need that in a motion, Joe, or should we just?
No, I've got, the instruction is enough. I
Okay.
can.
Okay, we're done with walls. So we can move on to the agenda item number 8, which is a master plan discussion on infrastructure.
Yes, so you want to, okay, all right. I've got some examples of traffic.
Yeah. All right, so I know we shared that the DPW Superintendent Trevor Sablocki would be here tonight. Unfortunately, he had a family situation pop up, so I'm going to run through a couple of slides with some information that is a little bit dated that AEW or engineers provided to Trevor, but to kind of visualize and give a better idea on the current state of the roads and infrastructure in the city. And there's some visuals with some maps in a greater detail. It's kind of taking stuff from the Pacer study and giving it a visual with some other information. So I would be happy to answer any questions throughout this. But since I am neither an engineer or the DPW superintendent, I intended just on having hopefully Joe or Andy scribe those questions, have either get a written response or have them attend another meeting to kind of answer those. So if it sounds good to everyone, I'm going to run through these slides and feel free to interrupt at your convenience if you guys have any questions. So again, this is just going to be about the roads, both local, major, the water system, the combined sewer. All right, so we have 9.62 miles of major roads in the city, which is identified as the red on this map. And red does not mean good or bad. It's just to point out the major roads. The local roads, we have 29.78 miles worth. And then a major road is classified as one based on a certain level of travel on it by vehicles, and then local would be the lower tier based on the travel. So again, and part of the stuff is from the 2017 survey, but think about the results here, what we were looking at, and then kind of where we are now. So what we have at this rate is for the most part a little bit worse. But again, and just to visualize, I felt like it helps. So here's some photos of, it might be kind of hard to see, of what some examples of the ratings of our roads are. So if you look on the top left corner, rating 9 is on council. So you can tell that it's relatively flat, not a lot of bumps in the road. And then over here on School Street, a little bit more, you can see a little bit divot there next to the curb. And then on Bywood, rating 4, you can see that there's been some cold patch work done. And then a good example of what a rating level 2 would be is on Selfridge, but the good news is that project is done. So kind of a good example to see what it previously looked like. And then if you've driven on it now, you can tell that it's brand new road. It feels feels great to drive on now. And again, this was a map which you guys have an updated version of, but it just kind of characterizes again the condition of the roads throughout the city. And I won't leave this up for too long since you guys have had the chance to look at the results from 2022. So on this slide, it shows the estimated numbers to redo all the roads that need to be redone, and this figure was from 2021. So that $80 million figure is going to be a little bit more expensive at this point, which we'll touch on at the end of this with all infrastructure included. Does anyone have any questions so far?
You know where AEW got that cost per lane mile? I'm just, I mean, the only one that I can really see is based on average cost of 715,000 per lane mile. But I know there's other per lane miles being noted. I just.
Yeah, this is based on 1.4 million lane per lane in Michigan, includes EIC. That's something I can get from them. I don't have the answer for you right now. So
What that number is now would be helpful.
Right.
So, and again, I'll touch on the numbers at the end. There's a slide that has the cost for roads, water and sewer, and we can talk about that a little bit later once you have all the numbers in front of you.
Just to reiterate that for me, this is 2017 numbers here.
Yes,
And
so
2022 service
was in-
provided.
yes, correct.
And
Sorry
then,
for
yeah, like I just looking at the rating, how it dropped.
And it
1.5, whatever it was.
exactly.
3.7.
And it did drop. It didn't drop drastically, but the figures in this one, again, just show that it's kind of fascinating to see what it looked like in 2017 compared to what is now. That, you know, it's been a decrease, but not a massive decrease. But the more we kind of wait, the more it's going to cost to do down the road. And so this is kind of what I was touching on earlier with, it's kind of cool to see projects that we've done over the last couple decades at this point with this. So the last time it looks like we did a road project outside of the one that was done last year was 2013, which is kind of scattered throughout the north area of the city. And then we've got a couple that were done between 2008 and 2011 in and around town. And then these were their suggested projects from 2021. So the top one we've completed at this point. And then for the Red Ruth and Broadacre projects, we have the federal grant money that I discussed last meeting associated with that we'll be having to cover a 20% match, which will certainly bring the cost down for those projects. The other one below it,
Sorry, Nick, what was the source of that federal grant?
it was through the community earmarks, essentially through the federal government. So they were, Clausen at the time had 2 congressional districts. So we applied for projects to both our Congress person at the time. Luckily, we got money from both. So thankful for an election year that was the case. So those projects we're hoping to have done sometime next year.
And do you have any idea what's going on with Broadacre now? It's all torn up because of all the school construction. We, in the city, we were gonna repave it. We don't have the money to do it right now. Are they just gonna patch that thing to make it through until next year?
So
They torn it up for water and there's steel plates in the road now.
the work currently going on in Broadacre is done by consumers. There were I believe there was an extra gas line somewhere along the area that they were removing that was no longer used. And so the work that they're doing on North Main Street, I'm sure if you guys driven down North Main Street, it's kind of redirected. They're going to have a contractor go around and bore, quality cement, make sure that's flat. But on Broadacre right there, that area is where we'll be part of the project for the grant money that we have. And so they're just going to patch it up, and then next year that should be done in consultation with the water main.
The work to be done. Patch or something.
It'll be better than cold patch because the holes there are a little bit bigger, but they're not going to go invest a lot of money in concrete when we're going to be doing it next year.
Right, there's a lot of school buses, traffic. stuff either. So.
Correct.
And the city's taking that cost, not the school, as part of the millage, right?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, the school district can't spend any money outside of on property that they own. But consumers, right now, there's no city dollars associated with that. Because consumers is doing it, the
Oh, okay.
ongoing work right now. But next year, when we hope to have that work done with the federal grant money, is going to be done by the city.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And then there were a couple other projects in here that we have. Joint sealing is one that we haven't done recently, but we've talked about having a joint sealing program started in the spring of next year. So after we get through this winter. And then here is just a visual of the major street paving when some of these roads were done. And so the higher travel roads that we have are relatively new.
You mentioned the joint sealing program. I think especially as we pick up some of these road projects, you know, it's important that we maintain them. You can tell just by a lot of the roads that are in poor condition that there wasn't adequate maintenance over the years, or they were maintained incorrectly. So I would definitely support or encourage that we have at least a joint sealing program, if not a annual maintenance program.
Yeah, and I think that's the intent of what we'll be doing in the future. We're still kind of working out the facts before it's presented to council, but it's something that we're hoping to have in front of them at some point in the near future. And again, this was just their suggested road program for the major roads, which again, it's cool to see that we've got that one already completed. This one to be completed with grant money, and same with that one there. So again, it's cool to visualize what we've been able to do and what we'll be doing in the near future. And so that wraps up the part on roads. And so we're going to be going into talking about the water system. And
Can I
so
ask a question before we go? there?
absolutely.
So I know there's a distinction between. It broke down like what streets are concrete versus what streets are composite, is that right?
I believe that was in the Pacer study.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what?
That was in the Pacer study, I believe.
Yeah, like, what's the distinction and then what are we currently using and? I'm
That's a good
sure-
question that we'll have to come
Okay.
back on.
Well, cause I'm sure, I think we've almost discussed it before, like, that wasn't good material, this is what we use now, and I'm sure you know, like, are we using the right materials, and which one is not good, and which one deteriorates faster, I don't know.
Which one's more
Is there-
durable based on,
Come on, show us
So-
your knowledge here.
Well, I mean, there's pros and cons between concrete and asphalt pavement.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right, in terms of also cost per mile, you at a high level from a overall project perspective, you're not gonna see a whole lot of difference at a total project cost. Right, if you're boiling it down to, you know, specific, you know, sand and concrete and all the layers versus an asphalt road pavement, then you might be getting too far into the weeds, but at overall cost, it's about the same per mile, so to speak. There's different opinions on this, but you know, some would say that asphalt roads are easier to maintain over time than concrete roads, but concrete roads, generally speaking, last longer than asphalt roads. So it's
and is there truth to like one's more impervious than the other, right? Like concrete's more of an impervious than an asphalt?
it is a little bit more impervious. That's usually why it lasts a little bit longer.
Okay,
Some of that goes to the quality of the product, right? Like the quality of the materials that you're using. And how it's maintained, like joint sealing. Joint sealing is key to that. And then as soon as you start seeing certain concrete slabs within the road start cracking beyond beyond the joints, if you're not replacing that specific slab in a good enough time, it just that allows for more water to get underneath the concrete
yeah,
and to make the rest of the pavement fail. So it won't just be one slab, it'll be multiple slabs or the entire road. So if we're not on top of maintenance on a concrete road, then it could be a lot more expensive to fix later down the road.
Versus the asphalt.
Versus the asphalt.
Okay, all right, thanks.
All right, good to keep going. Thank you
Yeah.
for that explanation. I
Yeah.
think that definitely helped everyone.
Underground.
Let's go underground. So this is a photo from, I don't know when, but it is from a water main that we had at some point in the city that I think was removed due to a water main break. And so this is the result of, using the infrastructure for a long period of time, and they're more subject to break as material builds up. And so I don't think anything was in, you guys have looked at anything water main wise. So this map here shows the type of water main, the size, and where that's located. And so as you can tell, along our major thoroughfares, you've got the larger water mains, and as you get into the residential districts, there's more of the 8-inch and 6-inch water main.
Are we gonna receive information more? I mean, this is hard to read.
Yeah,
And it's dated, so I mean, do we have updated information that we'll receive about this?
Well, I mean, stuff like this hasn't changed much. We've done maybe one water main project outside of fixing water main breaks. So this is probably as up to date. The water main stuff, I believe, is going to be more accurate than the previous road. But I'll see if we can get that together. I'm not certain at this
You'll
point.
hear this.
I can send this presentation after, yeah. Yeah, and again, I know it's kind of hard to see, but yeah, I just hope you guys are kind of at least being able to visualize a little bit.
Let's kind of tell us the colors real quick, what they stand for.
Oh, of
Just really fast, Nick.
Yeah, so there's a purple, which we don't have a ton of, which is 16-inch water main. We've got the blue, which is 12-inch water main, orange, which is 8-inch water main, and then red is 6-inch water main. And all those have certain levels of flow and whatnot. I don't have that background to share with you. And then here's a map of the water main age. And this one, I think you guys will have to take a better look at on your own computer once that's in your inbox. But essentially, a large portion of our water main is dated. It's still operational, but the older the water main is, the more likely it is that the ground is shifted, causing a potential water main break, which means more staff and resources have to go to fixing those. And after working here for a couple of years, those never happen during the day. They always happen at 1 o'clock in the morning. So
what's the red, Nick? That's the oldest.
That's
What is that?
1920 to 1929.
1920 to 1929.
Yeah, and then it goes up in 10-year increments,
And, okay.
9-year increments.
Do we have any information on neighboring communities? Like, is this pretty close to
Yeah,
Royal Oak or Troy? I mean, those are gonna be.
Yeah,
Closer to Royal Oak than.
Yeah, I was gonna say Troy's a little newer.
yeah, and then if you look in, Berkeley, Huntington Woods, I'm sure they're relatively the same as what we're looking at.
The other thing about the older communities, the lower Woodward corridor, Clawson, Birmingham, tend to have combined storm and sanitary sewers. Whereas when you get further out, you have separated storm and sanitary sewers. And ultimately, if you had your way, you'd separate them, right? Because if the storm sewer overflows, you don't want
The water would be.
sanitary sewer to also be mixing in with that. But of course, that is a major expense. They actually have done some of that separation up in Port Huron. They did it with some federal money. So it can be done. But we have 134 square miles of Detroit and the entire downriver area, all of the lower Woodward corridor, parts of Farmington and Redford, the Grosse Points, Harper Woods, the lower Gratiot corridor, most of Warren, all of that is combined storm and sanitary sewer. So
It's the
we've
whole
got,
Red Run, right? But
Yeah.
wouldn't it happen drain by drain in.
essentially, yeah,
Do
you would have to.
cities create a dry basin or a dry well for storm versus like the sanitary. I'm curious how Port Huron started implementing. Did they redo their whole thing or did they do it like section by
Yeah.
section and put in a dry well for like? the
I don't have the
overflow storm?
details on exactly how they did it. I just know that they started the project.
Yeah.
It was a couple years ago. I think it was maybe a year before COVID hit. So I'm not sure what the progress has been. But that was the project. And the unfortunate thing is in this region, you know, you've got 250 square miles served by combined storm and sanitary sewer that it's an absolutely massive undertaking to separate.
For sure, and like, you know, I've said this before, like, we can do everything right in Clauston, but we're still getting everybody else's, right?
Yeah, it still
And-
comes from here.
We haven't gotten to sewer though. Can we hold that thought until we get to sewer and then we can talk about that. 'Cause I think that's probably coming up, but I have a question about the potable water system. Do you have statistics on water main breaks over the past, say, 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years?
So
Or more?
There are, I would say, probably about 8 to 12, and that can fluctuate depending on I'd say 80-90% probably happen in the winter just because the ground thaws, unthaws, and the pipes shift. I know the DPW has those stats on hand. I just don't know them off the top of my head. So that's one that we'll definitely get circled back on.
That'd be great, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can only speak from my personal experience, but we've had quite a few around my area.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering for the entirety of Clausen, what that looks like, you know?
Yeah, I don't have that number, but I think it's one that would definitely help you guys in your thought process. So we'll just
Sorry, it was just a
continue.
burning question that I had to get out. I know we were talking about sewers for a minute, but.
So here's a little graphic on the estimated replacement cost of water mains 55 years or older. Again, a bit outdated information, and I'll touch on this at the end there's a combined slide for all the infrastructure.
Do we have any pump stations
In the city,
in the city?
I'm gonna go with no, because I feel like I would know if we did have a pump station. I don't think we do.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'm fairly confident that we don't.
We used to have a water tower. When I was a kid, was up with the Clausen Center there.
Oh, we've got a couple pictures in City Hall of that.
About 10 years ago, I tried to bring it back with the idea if we bought water, we'd buy it cheaper at night. Fill it up during the day, but I kind of got turned down on that one.
That's innovative.
So are you doing that?
It was a nice looking tower. Give the kids something to do.
Yeah.
Spray paint.
And so this is just a suggested water main CIP program, which again is not something we've been able to do a lot of, but whenever we're doing a road and the water main needs to be redone, we're of course bundling that together to try and save money where we can.
And are we just doing that for water mains or are we doing that for sewers too?
Yeah, the sewer system is in conjunction with the county. With this specifically, it's just the water main, because we're not gonna, only thing we would do to do the sewer at this point is to fix it if it's broken, if it's cracked. We wouldn't go and separate them because we're in the Oakland County drain system, and so ours is combined because theirs is combined, and we have very little control over,
Right.
the say there. So you
So-
kind of hit on that a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
It's a countywide problem.
So we couldn't, if we wanted to, go in and make dry basins and kind of contain our own.
I don't want to answer that because I don't know if we certainly can't. I just imagine if we did, it would probably cost a lot more money than what it's worth instead of fixing our current infrastructure.
And I know you want to go away from sewers and we're not there yet, but like, how do we find out when a sewer has an issue? Like a water main, we find out, because there's leaks on the sidewalks, right? Like, so where do we find out when there's a sewer issue?
In your basement.
Back up, yeah.
Well, I mean, that happens every time it rains, but like, how do we narrow that down? And fix it?
They inspect it.
Yeah, so
You're talking
well,
about individual residential homes?
No, that wouldn't be covered though, right? It'd just be.
you're just chomping at the bit. There's like a couple slides that'll
Okay.
show about the camera in and whatnot. So
Oh, wait, oh, wait.
I love the enthusiasm. And then just a couple bullet points on benefits of water CIP. increase water pressure and flow, better for fire protection and home water use, reduce water main breaks, reduce water loss unaccounted for water, or uniform distribution of water throughout the city. So things we've kind of chatted about throughout this entire time. All right, you can take a deep breath right here.
Hey.
So,
How are these numbers actually being figured? Like, was it put out to bid already, or are these just?
so the way I understand it, and I can get some clarity on that for sure, is we've been using the AEW for a long period of time. And so they've had the opportunity to collect a lot of this data as projects come in, as something gets upgraded. Yeah, so the water main that we have on Broadacre that'll be redone next year is currently a 6-inch main. There's currently no main in some area. So once that project's done, they'll update that in their records. And so in the next map that gets created, it'll show that it's now an 8-inch main, not a 6-inch main, if that makes sense. And a lot of this, since there hasn't been a lot of improvements, the change hasn't been
So
very
they're lowering, they're going from an
6
8-inch
inch-
to a six,
6-inch to 8-inch.
okay, sorry, okay.
So here is a map for sewer cleaning and then camera in the sewers. And so the last time there was a citywide camera the sewer was 2007, 2008, where they went through and put the camera through every possible location of where their sewer was. And then in 2018, a couple sporadic locations throughout the city. And so what that does is identify potential areas of where those sewers shifted, might be broken, might be leaking. So that's,
Which color is which?
The-
There's a lot of blue.
yeah, the blue is from 2007, 2008.
So does that mean it's good or bad?
That doesn't identify, that just identifies that it was done.
It was
It was-
replaced?
No, that it was inspected.
Oh,
They
okay.
run a, yeah.
So there's no results on this map?
Not on this specific map.
Okay, sorry. I thought it was results.
Is
Okay.
this telling us that the last time it was inspected was in 2018?
For a couple locations,
But before that, it was 2008, right?
yes.
Okay.
And I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I know that it was a significant cost and project when we did camera the entire city. That's another number that we can provide you guys to give an idea what it cost in 2008 and what we can imagine it would cost in 2023. So here is the map of the sewer rehabilitation that has been done. And if you guys have questions on this, I'm unlikely going to be able to answer them, but please ask them so we can at least get them on record. We can get back to you guys.
I don't know what any of it says though, but what's the results?
Yeah,
I'll be honest, I don't know what some of this stuff means either. So
Is that mainly just small repairs too, or is that actually systems that?
this looks like repairs that were done, a couple replacement, couple pipe bursts.
So this isn't a result of the scope that you guys did citywide?
Well, and again, I don't know for certain.
Just rehab.
Yeah, so like it, when
Things
they,
failed and they rehabbed.
right, so when they went through and cameraed, they're like, all right, let's say over here, what was that, Red Ruth. When they cameraed it, they saw, all right, there's probably gonna be some issues there in the future. And so they were maybe more monitoring it. And then when they did the camera, I'm sure there were some locations that they went in and proactively fixed with the sewer replacement.
Lack of sewer replacement. just for-
Can you just,
What's the
somebody tell
grade?
me what the red and
The
the,
green is open cut repair locations and the red is SCIPP locations. So I don't know what that acronym stands for.
CIPP?
SCIPP.
Oh,
I imagine it's some type of replacement. I just don't know for certain.
and then what's the blue on the way other side, just so I can.
Blue is pipe burst locations.
Pipe burst, okay.
And so one of those locations is where Selfridge and Phillips was, but that project was just redone. So all the stuff over there should be in good shape.
So, I mean, all these dates are 2013. Just the latest information you had, or is that 2013 at present, or?
So this was information that was provided in the 2021 report that we got.
Okay.
So this is
13 at present, probably.
probably the most recent information that they have.
Okay.
So you're saying essentially they went and they note and log every time there's an issue, and this is the report from that,
Correct.
from 2000, from when to when was the begin date?
Looks like it looks like this date is all from 2013. I just don't know for certain.
Just in the year of 2013 or from 2000
That was
to 2013?
done in 2013. And again, I apologize, guys. I don't have a ton of that
That's okay.
information.
All right.
I know you may not have this information either, but does the city or does the DPW do an annual maintenance on the sewers in terms of cleaning out catch basins or?
Yes, certainly.
Okay.
Yes, that's definitely something we actively do when there aren't, specific projects going on, we'll allocate crews to go do that for sure. And then so here are some figures for what it would look like to do sewer rehab and cleaning. Again, these numbers are off from what they would be now.
Those numbers are from 2013 as well.
No,
right?
these numbers are from 2021.
Okay.
Yeah. So benefits of sewer capital improvements, reduce the number of emergency repairs. Sinkholes, road cave-ins and sewer backups, average cost of trenchless repairs of $100 per foot versus $4 per foot for conventional excavation methods, proactive plan to address aging infrastructure versus crisis fixes. And then here was just a map kind of touching on all their proposed 5-year CIP plans. So we have, like I said from the start, we've done a good made progress on this, but have a lot to go still. And so when it comes to joint sealing, a lot of this will be done, but we've done some of the road reconstructions and the water mains already are planned for next year. And so this next slide is the combined total that I've been touching on previously. And so this number of 156 million is from 2021. The city manager a couple months ago put that number into an inflation calculator to get a more accurate cost. And that number was roughly $175 million to redo it all. So
What's the combined sewer even based on? Is it based on the repairs that were needed in that one map?
it's based on the Cameron and the repairs there. There's significantly less issues with the sewer than there are with the water main and the roads.
Interesting. Ask any resident, they will disagree. They will very much,
I think that's the difference between the private side and the public side.
for sure, I agree, but we interact with the private side every day. And giving them the correct information, they think that fixing the mains and the roads are gonna somehow fix the flooding in their basements. That's not gonna do anything to help the flooding mitigate their basements.
Well, new roads will certainly help with stormwater flow and retention. The water mains will help with,
How will it help with storm retention?
well, if you have new roads, it's gonna be able to be graded a different way.
That's definitely one of the advantages of a repaired road or replaced road is that typically the pitch is gonna be better, it's gonna channel water more effectively.
Out of basements?
Well, the water before it gets in the basements. So the issue that you're referring to is one that's a little more complicated just because of the combined system and how when our water is running off and going to the storm drains, it's going into the combined sewer in the city. And then all of our combined sewer leads towards the county drain. And so the water goes there. And so the storms that result in the highest flooding has significantly more water come in onto the property than it's built for lack of better words.
And the roads will fix that?
No, but our roads are not in good shape. And so
I
there's,
agree that the roads aren't in good shape, but I'm just saying that, well, one, I don't know where you get the combined sewer number. Because that was based on 2021 numbers and we don't know if that's just from the year 2021 or what for over 10 years. So I'm curious on that.
Well, in a capital improvement plan, which is what this was based on, is not meant to fix everything. It's meant to identify specific projects. And so that's what that was more intended for. When it came to infrastructure, this was obviously more focused on roads and water main.
I know you said that the flooding that our neighbors are experiencing in various different places across the city is complicated, and I get that. I mean, but I think that would be something good to have DPW come and explain the complexity around why that's happening and maybe give some advice to homeowners on how they can protect their property.
And that was 100% the intent tonight, instead of me giving you guys some poor answers. So I apologize. And I know that's when that happened with the most recent storm. When residents have communicated with the DPW, they've given them, methods to help out and to help limit it. And one thing that residents can do is to put in a backflow preventer. That's certainly something they can do on a private side. But of course, it's a cost to them, and not everyone has the resources to be able to do that. But that is one solution.
I mean, I just think an explanation, the residents look to us for, answers around how can we possibly fix this, or how can you help me, right?
Mm.
And if the infrastructure issue is so large that we really can't address it from a root cause perspective, then at least we need to explain that to them and explain to them how they can protect themselves.
Well, and I think that there's more the city can do.
Maybe.
The last rain, it wasn't, thank goodness it wasn't my basement, because I do have a backflow, and I highly recommend backflow for anybody that comes to me and asks me a question. Backflow. I'm very fortunate. But my backyard was flooded up into almost my deck. I'm probably the lowest point in the neighborhood, I would think, but that speaks directly to the city in the storm drains and where they're placed and how they flow. And I'm not directing this, Nick, I know you're not beholden of like how those operate, but when I first moved there, I reached out to DPW. It's, I can put in a dry well, but I can't handle a dry well for the whole neighborhood. I need it to take my backyard. So like, there's more that the city can do in terms of taking on the rainwater when it happens, in my opinion.
No, we agree. I mean, that's what we're talking about, right? It's how do we impact any of this? So I think we do have an open house, right, coming up. The whole idea is every module, I think infrastructure's first, will have an open house, and that's public as well, right?
Absolutely.
So I think it's up to us to ensure we have the right people from the city attend that open house and obviously promote it for folks in the city, to your point, to come ask questions, but also to learn the complexity of the problem, what we're hopefully can scope out and address, to your point, because there are things we could do. And then obviously anything that can be taken by the public to address it kind of personally, because I think there is this is obviously the biggest concern in the city and that we hear the most about. So I think we really need to get ahead of it, knowing that if it's supposed to be like next month, I believe that we're gonna have an open house. So
Yeah, I would
just
defer to
ensure that we
Jeff.
have the right people in attendance from the city at that point, but also if we can work on getting out some kind of, I don't know if we can use the city, social page or something, just to kind of.
Oh, but every single open house that we have will be
Yeah.
shared on social media and the website and
Yeah, we'll
whatnot.
get into because a survey thing too, I don't know where we're at.
Yeah.
I did not see it circulate very well on social media yet, and I want to talk about ways we can improve that, so.
Yeah.
I think this
Josh,
is a good
I
way to address it.
circulate, you can circulate it too.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think we all individually can
I
absolutely.
searched it, I
circulate.
couldn't find it. That's.
Oh,
that's
really?
how
Oh,
bad
I just shared the
I know,
link that they
circulate.
sent me.
It was,
but-
we'll get to it. I'm sorry. I didn't
Yeah.
mean to
Yeah,
take
no,
off that. But it's just a
Joe's gonna
perfect
touch on that
example of,
later.
Like how we can interact with the residents we're supposed to be obviously representing,
Yeah,
right?
I agree. Yeah.
So Nick, just circling back to the overall costs, I know, we're looking for efficiencies. We're talking about finding efficiencies when combining replacing water main with the road project. But I would go even further to challenge AEW, if that's the consultant that we continue to work with on the storm sewer, the combined sewer solution. I do know, or even, and challenge them to reach out and work with the Water Resources Commission. Because, in my experience, I know that the Water Resources Commission, I mean, not leading the effort, but with the specific cities and their consultants working with water resources to do whatever they can or find a solution to the problem. And you're right, it's a complicated problem because it's a combined system and enters into a county drain. But I think there are opportunities in which we can increase some of the stormwater capacity and slowing down the feed into the Oakland County, the various Oakland County drains. It's a little bit more costly, or could be more costly. So it may, but at the same time, how much does it cost? What's the value of the amount of complaints and the residents' basements? And, if we can do something along one road for one neighborhood at a time, I think that would mean a lot to the residents and everybody who lives here.
I would second that and even say not even just one road, but even building it in our future development plans, like Shawm. I know that's been kind of tossed around a little bit. But having, when he came, the 14-mile guy, came in front of us and talked about his 100-year dry well. That's something that in my opinion, should be building into every single development that comes in front of us. Is a way
they
to
do.
offset. In what that, I would love to know what that means, what that looks like, and if that can be enhanced in any way that we can speak directly to residents and say, we're trying little by little, inch by inch, we're making improvements here and offsetting those things.
Yeah, any new development has that type of stormwater retention. It's just the size of projects that we have don't affect it on a scale that we would hope for, but it certainly helps, every little thing helps.
For sure, and maybe I don't know the laws, is there a way to ask for a little bit more, especially in a PUD, that we can ask for a little extra? Can we ask for more in those PUDs and things where they're coming to us for variances? I think there's a lot of opportunity to ask for a little bit extra.
You can and should ask for more with a PUD. Yeah.
I agree, Joe. I don't think we typically ask for enough. So just something to kind of bring up in talking points in our future. Maybe we can build it in an ordinance. I don't know.
So that concludes the information that I had to share with you guys tonight. I will get those questions on paper and then see if I can get a response from DPW and engineering and then provide that to you guys.
So they won't come. It's not I'll be there next time kind of thing.
Well, they certainly could, but at the same time, we are on a time frame, and the longer that we extend certain conversations, the farther this maybe get pushed back. I think for the open house, they would certainly attend and have information there. But to have them come to another planning commission meeting, they'd probably share a lot of the same information that I have. I don't think there'd be anything new. They'd just be able to answer the questions in much more greater detail than I'm able to. And if the answers are on paper, we can distribute them. If those questions are put on paper, then they'll be put in your packet. They'll be available to the public.
If they are, you said?
If and when.
I think it's important enough to get a clear answer from DPW. This is kind of really important in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the sewers are the biggest issue in my mind from an infrastructure perspective. I know that we have crumbling roads. I know that we have sewer main breaks. It happens all the time. But man, we really got to get our act together around the sewers and provide some relief to the residents of the community. And I think it's important for us to understand, even though it's complicated, understand what's going on so that we can help make the right decisions.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree with you guys wholeheartedly. It's a huge issue, and there's going to be a lot of steps to get to a point to do it. And I think just the more information you guys have in front of you is only going to help. So
yeah, but it seems like there's and it's not you, Nick, but there's an issue when it comes to the information getting to us. How can we get reassurance that information is I guess, coming to us?
Well, by the end of this week, I'll have the questions compiled, give it to them, and I'll be on them to get an answer. And I would love to say it'll be by the next planning commission meeting. I doubt it, just based on other projects and whatnot, but as soon as possible.
And Nick, I think the frustration is, a lot of times it feels like this body is not prioritized from folks that we get commitments that are gonna join our meetings, and then they often don't. But in this case, I think if we have a commitment that, we'll have that attendance at the open house, and we can somehow document it and share that with the community, whether it's a live feed, but it could be recorded or some type of summary that we can put out afterwards. I think that would address a lot of what this body's looking for. So I think that's the key. Get the commitment that they'll be there at the open house. We can find a way to document that and then share it more broadly for folks who can't attend live.
And the one thing I'll share is that I do appreciate the passion from this body about updating this master plan and kind of the direction we want to take this in. But I share a similar concern that's been voiced, because, memories of the capital improvement plan comes to mind in the last couple of times that it felt like it was presented to us at the very last minute as a draft, and where we were expected to approve it either at that meeting or the next meeting, it felt like. And I certainly don't want that to happen to this master plan, because I think we all here care about the direction of this master plan.
Yeah, I would certainly agree. And I think that we've taken some time to talk about infrastructure and is important. And I mean, there's 2 or 3, maybe 4 scheduled meetings to talk about each topic. And, it's not a presentation, close the laptop and we're done. So you guys' dialogue has been very impactful. I've heard their laptops typing away. I imagine they're typing notes and working on the language for the master plan. And, the product that's presented to you guys, it's from the planning commission. So if you guys don't like it, then have the opportunity to change it.
Thank you.
All right,
I think you got enough to go on there.
I think Joe has some other information he wanted to add.
Yeah, I did have a little quick presentation on traffic calming, so I'll just throw that up there. Because we wanted to talk about some of the actual infrastructure that could potentially be implemented to slow vehicles down.
Flood the roads. Just slow them down every time.
Right, so just defining traffic calming. So using physical design and other measures to reduce vehicle speeds and improve safety. So we're trying to slow vehicles down. It's thinking beyond speed limits and signage. So we have tons of signs that say speed limit 30 miles an hour, speed limit 25 miles an hour. You're going north on Main, north of 14 Mile, and it says speed limit 25 miles an hour. What percentage of vehicles drive 25 miles an hour going north on Main, north of 14 Mile? It's like 2% or something, because it's 4 lanes and it's absolutely massive. It looks like a drag strip. So people drive fast on it. And a sign that says 25 miles an hour generally isn't going to slow them down very much. It might slow them to 35 miles an hour as opposed to 45, but still they're going faster than what the sign says. So what are some things that we could potentially do physically, design wise, to slow people down in key places that might be more effective? So starting kind of at the lowest end of things cost wise, we talk about pavement markings, because this is literally paint. And this is often the first step toward the implementation of harder traffic calming infrastructure. So the first thing you do when you're wondering if maybe bulbing out the curbs, and we'll talk about that a little bit further into the presentation, is going to be effective at slowing traffic down at a particular intersection, say near a school or something, is you might actually paint those bulb outs on the street and use a little bit of portable infrastructure, little plastic bollards and things to simulate what that curb would look like if you were actually to put it in. That way, you're not making the full investment in the actual curbing, but you're experimenting to see if you have the effect that you want. Maybe you're just trying to, shorten up the crossing distance or something like that. In other situations, pavement markings can be used just to indicate that you're in a special area or something. This happens to be in Oxford, England, where they do a lot of this, where they've got this grid painted on the intersection, and that means it's a signal to drivers that there's a lot of people around on foot and on bicycles here, and you have to share this intersection with them. And you're going to see a number of photos from other countries on here because, quite frankly, other countries do traffic calming better than the United States for the most part. Just most of the best examples are not in the United States. There are good examples in the United States, but you see it's much more pervasive in a lot of other countries. So another thing that we can talk about is things that physically force vehicles to reduce their speed. You have a speed table, a bump, a raised crosswalk. Not only does a speed table like this, where you have a crosswalk painted on top of it, force a vehicle to slow down so it doesn't bottom out or scrape the front of the vehicle on the pavement, it also raises the profile of the people crossing the street. So they're more visible to drivers, especially now that we've got so many very tall vehicles. So this is something that we can look at, and these raised sections of street can have a lot of different scales. They can be kind of like a rubber bump, which is more common to see in like an alley or a parking lot or something, all the way to this kind of raised table to even have an entire raised intersection. It really depends on the effect that you're trying to get. But in all of those cases, you're making a sort of obstruction to the free passage of a vehicle that forces a reduction in speed.
So you're saying that that's for a reduction in speed, not just for safety of a crosswalk?
Yeah, well, it's going to reduce the speed of those vehicles there. They're not going to be able to blow through that crosswalk at the same speed they would drive down the street.
Okay.
They're going to have to stop or they're going to damage their vehicle. Another thing that we can look at, and there's lots of examples of this because there's so many ways to narrow a street. So I've got a bunch of slides in here that are all related to various types of narrowing. It can be as simple as painting lanes narrower or having less pavement width on a street. But that's only one thing that we can look at. So I already alluded to this one, curb extensions and bulb outs. Now, this is not exclusively done at intersections. You could do this at a mid-block crossing as well. But it's most frequently done at intersections. And what you're doing is you're bringing out the curb into the intersection a bit. And it can protect on-street parking if you've got on-street parking in the area, because it's sheltered now from the potential of oncoming vehicles. But it also has the effect of shortening the amount of time that a pedestrian has to be in the street, crossing the street, because you've brought the curbs out and now you've got a few feet on either side that you don't have to be in the flow of traffic when you're crossing the road. There are lots of different ways to treat curb extensions and bulb outs. This is a very basic treatment. You could have landscaping in there. There's all kinds of things you can do. But at its root, it's bringing the curb out to provide some additional protection, both to pedestrians and to whatever might be going on the sides of the street. So in a downtown, for instance, that's probably going to be on-street parking.
What's it called when you wait till the other side of the street to do it? Because I feel like, can we do this on Gordon and 16? Where everybody like races to get around the front of the line, but like this design just seems so much better than what the traditional design of narrowing a street would be, right? Before the light. Right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. And when you're figuring out where to do it, yeah, you want to determine the problem that you're trying to solve, and that should drive your design.
Right.
But yeah, this is a very versatile thing that you can
But so
do.
with that, like at 14 in Maine, you wouldn't be able to have a right turn lane, essentially.
You may not be, or you may have a narrower right turn lane. It depends a little bit. I mean, there's a certain geometry available there. So you have to look at the widths of the lanes that are already there, whether or not they can be reduced safely. And if they can, then you could potentially bulb out with the same number of lanes, or you might reduce it by a lane and just make the road itself narrower, and you have maybe a left turn lane, a lane that's either for going right or straight, and then your oncoming lane. So you might go down from 4 to 3. It kind of depends on how far you want to go, and what the problem is that you're trying to solve.
Do we get to choose all this stuff, or does it the road commission?
Well, the road commission would be involved on any roads where the road commission has authority.
Like 14
So,
in Maine?
Yeah, exactly. 14 Mile, yes,
Yeah.
they and Rochester and a couple other roads. But on, say,
This portion of
Elmwood,
14 Mile is the city road.
yes, this portion of 14 Mile actually is city.
14 Mile in Maine is city of Clawson.
For west of Maine, are you talking?
Well, I guess both directions.
Both?
Yeah, in
They
both
are?
directions, yeah. It has like a major road designation, so we do have to coordinate with SEMCOG because of the truck traffic, I think. But nevertheless, yeah, it is actually Clawson
City,
Road.
I'm a huge fan of this, right? And unfortunately, we talked about this many times, but the cities, and not just Clawson, they're designed for car traffic, not
Oh,
foot traffic,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So we're uphill battle here, but I know, I'm just trying to think about how to think about this and incorporate it into the master plan. There's already been studies, right, that we've done. I think even the DDA has looked at traffic, like road traffic diets, and changing parking and things.
Yep.
Do we have access to the information and what the results were?
Yeah, in fact,
Not recreating the wheel.
with the DDA as part of their master plan update, we are going to be looking at 14 Mile Road and a potential
Topic.
narrowing. So those designs will definitely be available to the planning commission.
'Cause I mean, that's fantastic. I'd love to see that information. And of course, I mean, there's places, the schools, parks that we could think about incorporating this as well. but,
Absolutely.
Just trying to put it all in perspective of like what I should be taking away.
Right. So I think what we will probably do is as a group, we'll kind of narrow down to like maybe our top, selection of what we think would be most appropriate in various parts of Clawson, and then we can identify on a map. All right, these seem to be problem areas where we might want to look at.
Location and which of these particular options might be the best fit.
Exactly, yeah. So we should come away from this with a map that says these are a couple potential treatments for
You're saying
this
possible
area.
areas. Can you define that? Like speeders, you mean, or?
Well, that could be one problem. Just, dangerous corners or places where people feel like it's not safe to cross. Yeah, the speeders definitely is
Okay.
one potential thing that we could be looking to address. There's a couple streets that, I'm sure could use a little bit of
Well, yeah, you said
help on
Elmwood. I
that.
watched
Yeah,
somebody drive
Elmwood is
the school
definitely an
traffic and
example.
just make their own lane.
Yeah.
I mean, beyond me when there was kids, but like, I get it. But I'm wondering even like north of 14 Mile toward even like, okay, let's say south of 15 Mile, those little what are those BRD? Those little buildings, they've been for sale for a long time, but
Oh,
like,
sure.
I'm wondering if there's a way we can incorporate like a parking there as well, because there's certain areas, if we can double down and incorporate extra parking, on-street parking or something we can even consider for certain problem areas that have lack of parking because our buildings are so tight, and think of it in that light as well.
Sure, yeah. And we have thought about that actually,
Yeah,
particularly on Main north of 14 Mile. We've had numerous discussions in the office, Nick can attest to this, about the possibility of those, when it widens up those travel lanes, maybe some more parking in there.
Because, yeah, those businesses really, I feel like there's so much potential there. We lack parking and the availability of it. Yeah.
Yeah, are they trying to just calm the intersection of 14 and Main, or are we looking to calm the traffic flow from the entire downtown?
Well, that's what the DDA is looking at, is potentially 14-mile really through the whole downtown.
Because
Yeah,
I mean, everyone just right now, there's something similar to this going southbound. Where people just race up to it, stop, and then just race on through.
right,
So really
yeah,
doesn't stop calm traffic going through the downtown area, which is, I think, would be the objective, right?
right, exactly, yeah. In fact, right now, when you're going south on Main toward downtown, there's almost a perverse incentive to speed up if you're in the right
Right,
lane.
yeah.
Get in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I gotta get in front of this car before I get to the light, you know,
Yeah.
because it gets choked down. Yeah, that's actually, I've stood there and just watched as people just burn rubber
Right.
coming off the light and right out here. And just try to get in front of that car next to them. Other things to look at for narrowing, this may not be appropriate everywhere. It might be, it's probably a more targeted thing, but medians and barriers. One thing this can provide is pedestrian refuge. I wish I had a photo of it, because in Royal Oak, just north of the Berkeley line where the cemetery is, there's a street that's used as a major cut through. And it goes right along the north end of the cemetery. And what they did there, because they were having a problem with, there's a bend in Coolidge Highway there. It goes like this. And it's really hard to get good sight distances in both directions. And you had people pulling out into the middle, they'd get into the median, and then they'd have to go. It was an accident area. I've actually witnessed accidents there. And they put this little median in the intersection at Coolidge on the side street. And it's just couple little lumps of concrete, basically, with one of those bubble pedestrian markers in it. And it's remarkable how much it's changed the way that it was a very simple fix, but it's changed the way people come out of and go into that side street a lot, because they have to slow way down to go into it. They can't cross into the oncoming lane, making a quick turn. They have to really slow down to get between that little median and the curb. And then people coming out just have a little less space to do it. They're tend to be channeled more right now. It's a little harder to get to that middle area. So what you're seeing in this photo is a long median strip. It can actually be just this long. It really doesn't have to be big to have a major impact if it's done in the right spot. But a longer one can be used to prohibit dangerous lefts. So if you have a high volume street where people are trying to turn left, or you have a lot of driveways coming together and it's just not safe for people to be going left, a median in the right place could potentially prohibit those dangerous left turns and maybe channelize people to a spot where it's safer.
Like CVS. You talked
Yeah,
about
that area
CVS,
is a
you
great
have to-
example.
right,
You've got
yeah.
a bunch of stuff going
There
on at a
is.
major intersection,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's just not safe to try to go left at
Never.
all.
Don't.
I mean, it maybe if it's 11:30 in the evening, sure, but not during the day.
Yeah. That crosswalk is everything there at the gas station where
Sure.
they have the actual lights. I am a big promoter of the actual light crosswalks because like going to Royal Oak and reading their forums and stuff about people just never even stopping at their little sign crosswalks like you had at the
Sure.
beginning. Like just having the stoplight crosswalks, I feel like it's worth it to just always have that on a main street when you're in a downtown or kids are going to school.
It's less ambiguous. I think one of the issues that we have just as a nation is that because we've got 50 states with 50 different departments of transportation, we have something of a patchwork of approaches. And even within Michigan, the light timing is not particularly consistent. Sometimes you get the green arrow at the end of the light, sometimes you get it at the beginning. Sometimes when the green arrow goes away, it's red, and sometimes it's a flashing.
Yeah.
And so when you come up to an intersection for the first time, you don't necessarily know what to expect. And if we had a more uniform approach, it might help. But the thing is, even if we did have a uniform approach in Michigan, you go to Illinois and it's completely different. In Illinois, when you have two lanes, so all right, you're at an intersection, a four-way intersection, and you've got 4 travel lanes in all directions. And you're sitting and you're waiting to take a right, and the traffic across the intersection is going left in front of you. You are actually allowed to take a right. You have to stay in the near lane, and traffic that's taking a left from across the intersection stays in its near lane, and you have 2 lanes
Oh, my God.
turning.
I would
Together.
never let my kids ride their bike across that street.
When I moved to Illinois, this was 20 years ago, but when I moved to Illinois, I was like, what is going on? Like, why are these cars turning in front of me? And it was
Well,
terrifying.
it's important for pedestrians too. to
Sure.
know and predict what's going to happen at the
Exactly.
green arrow or the yellow or the
Yeah.
red.
But you
Yeah.
can't do that
Right,
here. And where I
yeah.
grew up, you couldn't do it there either. So there is a patchwork, and that's something that we fight against, right? Because
Mhm.
people's expectations are important. And, you know, when I went to Britain earlier this year, they have a particular style of crosswalk. It is a zebra crosswalk. So you've got your white stripes on black, and it has 2 poles, one on each side with a little gold orb on top. And when pedestrians approach that, when they're approaching it, not when their foot is in the street, when they're approaching it, all traffic has to stop. They're only put on 2-lane roads. And it's like that throughout the entire country. Everybody who's learning to drive learns that that's what that means.
What's at the top of it? You
It's
said?
like 2 little gold orbs that light up and
Oh,
flash.
okay.
So a car coming way down the street can see the little gold orbs, and they know, okay, well, I got to watch out for pedestrians because they're just going to walk out in front of me. Because that's the expectation
the
that's
right
been
of way,
created.
right?
They do have the right of way.
There's so much discussion on who's got the right of way in Michigan that nobody knows, right? Yeah.
And so the lack of uniformity is a challenge in the United States. But, you know, design can help with that. If it's well designed, you're probably going to come up with something that works. I think road diets are something that we're probably all familiar with by now. That's the next narrowing topic. So road diets, you know, you might have 4 travel lanes. The typical road diet, like the archetypal road diet, 4 travel lanes, 2 in each direction, dangerous configuration because people will stop to turn left and the cars behind them all of a sudden are backing up. The most frequent accident on 12 Mile in Berkeley is a side swipe when someone attempts to leave a lane to go around a car that's slowing down to turn, and there happens to be someone next to them, and you get a little crash. It's like that on 4-lane roads everywhere. So a lot of 4-lane roads are being converted to the 2 travel lanes with a turn lane configuration. That leaves space left over because you go from 4 travel lanes to 2 with a turn lane. All of a sudden, you've got all this extra footage of width. And bike lanes are a very common thing to put in that. Sometimes parking. In one of these examples, you can see they've added just some green on the side. They've actually narrowed the entire road and they've put some planting strips in. So there's lots of different ways that the details of a road diet can vary. But the principle is generally the same. You're reducing the number of travel lanes in favor of other things to improve safety. And flow too. If you've got the turn lane versus the start-stop of traffic, that's a much safer configuration.
Deter traffic to other streets.
In some cases, it might, particularly where you have frequent traffic lights. Because the main disadvantage of 1 lane versus 2 is that at a traffic light, the backups are longer. Just physically longer because you don't have as much queuing space. But when you don't have a lot of traffic lights, that's generally not that much of a problem. And yes, some traffic will be diverted to other streets by a configuration like
So
this.
As a business owner, I look at it as a positive and a negative. Reduced traffic means you got less people seeing your business,
Sure,
and that's a concern. Now, in my particular case, my business is near the intersection, so if traffic is all backed up, I got people sitting there looking at my business, so
sure.
I guess in my perspective, it would be a benefit.
Sure. Well, the other thing is that if the reconfiguration of the road brings more people on foot and by bike, that's going to be a net benefit to local businesses because people arriving on bikes and by foot, and I actually can pull some statistics for you on this, actually tend to spend more, particularly in downtown areas, but also in other commercial areas than people arriving by car. People arriving by car, yeah. So
Really?
people coming by car tend to take targeted trips. They go to the place they were going to go and then they go back home. Whereas if you're arriving by bike or on foot, if you're in a comfortable feeling area, you tend to linger. And a lot of the times you'll patronize multiple places. It's funny how different the mindset is when you arrive by the different modes, but there's actually a kind of a growing body of research on this, and I can pull some of that.
But does narrowing a road necessarily mean that you're gonna up your bike traffic?
It might.
I mean, it
depends on
might,
how
but
you-
it also
yeah.
might,
It depends on where you do.
oh, I
where
agree,
you do
like,
it.
I love all the small towns that have the parking, you know, on the west side where they've got the boulevard,
Sure.
but it also will increase speeding through the neighborhoods that are cut throughs from, you know, Main Street all the way to Crooks or Main Street to Coolidge, or sorry, Rochester and Crooks. It'll also increase speeds throughout the residential neighborhoods, right?
That's a possibility. It's not necessarily a guaranteed outcome. It depends on what you do in terms of your overall design. And I live just south of Edwards in Berkeley, which is the main road that people divert to when 12 Mile is closed or restricted, right? So, and yes, when the Irish Fest was going on last weekend, there were a ton of people on Edwards. From a long-term perspective, it doesn't necessarily have to be the case, right? If you do things to Edwards to spread things out along with 12 Mile, you're going to relieve some of that, or at least slow down some of that diverted traffic. So you do have to think holistically. You can't just think about the road that you're working on. You have
For
to think
sure.
about
Well,
what
I
its
think of
effects are
Elmwood,
on the
of
other
course,
roads.
which is extra wide.
Sure.
I also live on it, and it's essentially 14.5 mile, right?
It is 14.5 mile.
Right.
It's literally 14.5
Right,
mile.
right, and it goes from Rochester all the way to Coolidge. It's can feel like a main road sometimes,
Sure.
right?
Well, especially because you come off the portion that runs between Troy and Clausen. And then when you get into the portion that's entirely in Clausen, where it's all residential, you've just been
30
going
to 25.
pretty fast, and then you
Mhm.
cross Main and nothing changes about the road.
Right.
It's still the same width. It still feels exactly the same. Why would you slow down? Well, because there's a sign that says 25. No, I'm going 35. I feel pretty good doing this. If you can do something with Elmwood to choke it down a little bit, suddenly people will perceive the need to slow down because they don't have as much space as they did on the other portion of Elmwood that they were just rocketing down because they're going by a bunch of industrial businesses.
So there's a lot of stop signs in Elmwood, and it's also a newly paved road. What would you suggest aside from? Nobody's gonna wanna go tear up that road and put what'd you call those?
Well, you might not do curb extensions, but you might consider a speed table at an intersection or something like that. Where, so you've got, say at the park, you're not that far in if you're coming from the east. You've got a couple of stop signs there. You might put a speed table at one of those stop signs, put the crosswalk across it. You're getting kids higher up. You're forcing people to slow down and really think about that stop sign and slow down. If you had two of them, one on each side of the intersection, or maybe you raise the whole intersection, it depends on how far you want to go. that could have a major effect on whether people even choose to go through there or not.
Right.
But it would definitely affect the speed in that area. You know, it's going to take people a little while to get back up to a speed. But by the time they're going to get there, the road is curving and going up a hill. So, and that's going to slow people down too. The curve, the uphill, that people are perceiving a change in their environment. And also once you get past the school site, there's more trees. So people are feeling more enclosed and like they're in a smaller space. So they're also thinking a little bit more about where they are and the fact that there's lots of things close to them. So they tend to go slower there than they do on the portion that goes by the park, which is designed more like a drag strip.
So is there a magic, I'm sure there's not a magic number, but like if we were thinking in our master plan of doing some type of traffic calming on a main or whatever, a main street, is there a magic number to like, well, then you probably should do street softening for this amount of the neighborhood if it goes in all the way through, right? Like there's some streets along Main Street that don't go all the way through like Elmwood does. And they probably won't get just racers. Like, is there some type of like, well, if you're within a quarter mile, half a mile of that softening, you should probably look to do traffic calming in these spots as well.
I mean, I'm sure there's not a magic number, but there's probably some acceleration data and speed data that you can look at that would give you a sense of what, you know, let's say you're really trying to affect serious traffic calming all down the length of a road. And you've got roughly a mile there, right? Yeah, there's probably some data that we could look at to tell us roughly what spacing would affect a very major change in speed on the road. But I don't think that at least I haven't seen it, and maybe someone has. I don't think that there's really like a standard number at this point. Maybe we'll arrive at one at some point. If I find the magic number,
I know there's
I'll,
not like one. Number that'd be too easy.
I'll go national with it and make $1 million.
As we're looking at infrastructure in our master plan, if DDA is looking to do something and achieve something downtown, I totally support that, but we're here to deal with the residential ramifications of what
Sure,
that
yeah.
potentially might
No, you
look
have
like,
to
and
think
I feel
about it.
like that's important for us to maybe just have a scope, like a just idea, right?
Sure.
I don't expect magic. But yeah,
No, and it is very important to think about what the knock-on effects of anything you do are going to be, because they will exist.
it will for sure. Yeah.
Another thing that generally is considered to calm traffic is on-street parking. And this is a picture of downtown Petoskey, but this actually works on residential streets as well. So during the day, and Berkeley and Clausen have the same rule about overnight street parking. So my neighborhood is like yours, where nobody's not parked on the street overnight, but during the day, there's tons of cars parked up and down my street. And it forces vehicles to weave a little bit. It forces sometimes one car to stop to let another car get through. It really slows people down through my street. And I live on a street that leads up to a school. So in the morning, you've got parents racing down my street to get their kids to school. And, you know, you park a few cars and you park them correctly, it forces them to slow down because they can't necessarily get through if there's someone coming in the other direction. So that's actually a sort of narrowing itself, right? You're not doing anything physically to the street, but you're allowing people to put their vehicles along it, and it restricts the flow of traffic. And, you know, when you look at it from a community-wide standpoint, you do need to have certain streets that are open on one side for fire. In Berkeley, an example of that would be Tyler Avenue, which has a light on 12 Mile, and you cannot park on the west side of Tyler Avenue at any time of day. You can park on the east side, but it's a fire route, so you got to keep that west side open. So that's another thing that needs to be considered, but nevertheless, on-street parking does calm traffic. It does it in downtowns. It does it in neighborhoods. It's pretty well proven at this point that it's effective. And if you combine it with something like curb bulb outs or something like that, then it can have a really strong effect. This is a sort of extreme example. This was invented in the Netherlands. That's why it's called a Woonerf. It's a common space created to be shared by pedestrians, bicyclists, and low-speed motor vehicles. So as you can see, this is extremely restricted. Any vehicle going through here is going to be going very, very slowly, and it's probably not going to be a very large vehicle either. But there's a lot going on down here. You've got stores, you've got people's front doors, you've got little sidewalks, there's bollards to keep vehicles off the sidewalks, there's a bike parked there, there's merchandise displays and things. It's all really mixed together. And the entire idea here is that, yes, there are vehicles that need to access this area because that's where people live and they need a place to put their car. But only those vehicles should be coming through here. This is not meant to be a cut through. And when those vehicles do come through here, there's a lot going on and they need to be going very, very slowly. This is not a common road type in the United States at all, to the extent that it even exists here. But, you know, there are probably places in the United States where it would be a good idea. Clawson may not have any of them, but I wanted to show the example to kind of get everybody's mind going as to just how far traffic calming can be taken while still allowing vehicles in.
It looks like an alley essentially, right?
In the US, this would be probably considered an alley, yeah.
Where it's like, it's almost an inconvenience to travel it, so the people that are trying to go fast just don't want to go there.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. You know, and of course, there are more alternative ways to get around in this particular city too, than there are in most American communities. So you probably have fewer vehicles per household, like many fewer vehicles per household, like maybe a tenth of the number that you have here. Getting away from narrowing, I mean, I guess this is kind of a sort of narrowing, but more into diverting flow. There's a bunch of different ways that this can be done. This is in a park in Bath, England. But this is called the chicane. And what it does is it forces traffic to shift temporarily. You can pilot this with paint. So you paint some of these bulb outs. And what the shift does is it makes, and this is almost the exact same effect as the cars parked on my street, right? Where people have to go over here and then they have to go over here and they have to wait for someone to come through and then they can go again. It's really what it's doing is it's forcing at a certain point along the street, the driver to say, all right, I really need to slow down here because I'm making some maneuvers that are more complex than just driving in a straight line. You know, long term, they're most effective when they're curved, but like I said, they can be piloted with paint, just like most of these things. This photo doesn't capture it as well as I was hoping, but a lateral shift. So what this does is it shifts the alignment of lanes to slow vehicles. So this is Eton, England. It's across the river from Windsor. And what they do is they have about 8 on-street parking spaces, and they'll be on one side of the street. And then at the end, there's a bulb out with some landscaping. And across the street at an angle, there's another bulb out with some landscaping. And then there's 8 parking spaces on the other side of the street. And the traffic flow, it's one way on this street, has to go from this side to the other side. And it's a little bit like the same effect as the chicane, where the need to shift from one side of the street to the other and everything being on the opposite side that it just was, forces people in a vehicle to think about the speed they're going, what's going on around them, where things are, and it just increases the awareness of their surroundings. And this is done in particularly East Coast cities have a lot of examples of this in the US. This is a intersection realignment. It works best at bad T intersections. Where you might have vehicles that on the continuous road tend to either run the stop sign, or if there are no stop signs, maybe they're just blasting through, and that makes it difficult for people entering the continuing road from a side street. And really what this is just a little kind of bump out that forces the traffic to go around it and slows things down at the intersection. Most effective when combined with a stop sign. I'm just kidding. This is this is the magic roundabout in Swindon, England. It,
Years ago.
yeah, this is madness. It's kind of fun to watch though, if you watch a video of it. I have a friend whose parents live near Swindon, and he goes through it all the time. No, this is more what we're talking about right here, which is, more typical of a Michigan roundabout. Now, most of the ones in this area have been done out in townships, where you've got two major mile roads coming together. They're starting to appear in other places now, though. For instance, Normandy and Greenfield now has one. And that's a half-mile road and a mile road. But it's all 2 lanes, right? So, roundabouts, they encourage flow, but they also encourage slowing down. They reduce the severity of crashes because you have oblique angles instead of straight up T-boning someone in a normal intersection. And there's a lot of different ways that they can be used. This one has no sidewalks or crosswalks or anything. It was just an example I had at hand. But that's another potential thing that could be used in certain circumstances, and it might be appropriate in 1 or 2 locations in a city like Clawson. But it also eats a little bit of land off the corners. So rather than extending curbs, we're actually knocking them back to get the land that we need to put in the roundabout. Now, mini roundabouts, which are less common, take up less land, and they sort of just divert you around a much smaller obstacle. My in-laws actually have one right near them out in Kansas. And the intersection really takes up no more land than a typical 4-way intersection, but it's got a little roundabout in the middle of it. It makes everybody stop and think and yield. And it's definitely effective at slowing traffic down. And they put it in because they've got a school right there on the corner. This is another one. It's mode filtering. So in this case, this is Oxford, England. This lets bikes come through, and of course a pedestrian could walk through there too, but a car cannot get through there. So it's telling bikes that they can have a little more freedom on this part of the roadway than cars can. And it's giving them more options for directional travel than vehicles will have. This is most appropriate when you're entering a specialized area. So if we were to, develop some sort of pedestrian plaza or something, maybe the area around it might be an appropriate thing to do, where you filter your modes, but you still have continuous travel paths for less intense vehicles like bikes. Enclosure is another method of traffic calming. This is Spain. It's Barcelona, but you got trees, you got tall buildings right up close to the street. It really kind of feels like you're in a room almost. And it's really the psychological effect of that is that you want to slow down. So we have in our urban design manuals, and I can provide some examples of this, a set of ratios of building height to right-of-way width. And if you look around Southeast Michigan, what you find is that Southeast Michigan pretty much just does not have the ratio of building height to right of way width that you need to provide that sense of enclosure, generally speaking. Get to downtown Detroit or something, yes, you're going to have it because you got tall buildings. But what we find is that we got a lot of really wide rights of way, a lot of really short buildings along them. And this sense of enclosure is generally not provided by the buildings. So what we might think about, particularly in downtown, but possibly elsewhere as well, is, well, how do we get that sense of enclosure? Because we know we're not going to build a bunch of 6-story buildings. So how do we get that sense of enclosure without doing that? Well, trees is one way. So more trees along the right of way, larger trees. Parking can do it in certain situations, but you're probably not going to put that all down West 14 Mile. So we have to think about, well, what's the right treatment for the context of the area? And there's lots of different things that you can do, but the more you can create that sense of enclosure along all of your roadways, the more people are psychologically going to understand that they're in a place where they should not be traveling as fast as they might otherwise. And if you combine that with some of the other physical design elements that we've been talking about, then you can affect a much greater degree of safety than you would otherwise.
Joe, isn't there like, I think we've talked about it before, but like, there's a push to have the setback of the building closer to the road and have the parking behind the
Yes,
building.
yeah, and that's one of the
Yeah.
reasons is
Right.
that bringing the buildings up, it gives people something to look at, right? You know, when the
Yeah.
buildings are across a, 300-foot parking lot, it's like, what is that back there? That's a Lowe's, okay. But when you've got restaurant windows and all kinds of other things, shop displays, that's actually something that people might want to pay attention to. And yeah, bringing those buildings up, even if they're not tall,
Mhm.
bringing them up gives you more of that sense of the room, the outdoor room, where
Right,
you've got
and
the
it's
walls.
pedestrian friendly and it
Right.
it
feels like you can walk to it.
Have that in works, right? As in terms of new development.
For the most part, yeah. I mean, I would say the Westgate is probably our main exception to that, just because we've got
For
a couple
sure.
large plazas over there. But for the most part, Clawson has that feel.
Well, I mean, in future developments, isn't that written that that's how
is,
future
yeah.
developments are gonna happen?
That's our future. That's
Yeah.
the future of development in Clawson. Yeah, we don't want the front yard parking anymore.
Right,
Um,
it's safer for pedestrian, it provides a sense of community for pedestrian. Are you thinking that that's not? We need to add more to that then, or?
I mean, possibly. It depends on the location, I think. In some places, I think it's very effective on its own. In other places, it's probably more effective with other treatments and trees and things. Just to get, when you've got a really wide right of way, a 1-story building, even when it is up close to the street, it's still pretty small. So adding the trees and things gives you more of that sense of, okay, I'm in an enclosed space.
So that the new multi or mixed use building that was subject of the fence discussion.
Mhm.
Is that setback being brought closer to 14 Mile?
It's let's see, I'm trying to remember how far
The
back
right
it
of way,
is.
there's probably 20+ feet, right? The easement between sidewalk and.
Yeah, something like that. It is, I want to say 25 feet from the sidewalk, something like that. It hasn't been brought up as far as it might, I guess.
But that's not city center either, right?
It's not city center, no.
Yeah.
Our multifamily, our commercial districts have all, other than Westgate, have all been pretty much modified to bring the buildings up, but our multifamily district still has really huge setbacks in it. And it's probably something we need to look at ultimately. Yeah, that is going to be set a little further back than a lot of the commercial buildings. So we go from enclosure to closure. This is obviously something you could potentially do with a street. You can partially or completely close a road to private vehicles. In some places like downtown Melbourne, Australia has a street that's completely closed to vehicles, except that it has a streetcar line running down it. But and there's actually a lot of examples of that around the world. But closing a street obviously is a big decision, particularly when most people get around by car in your community. So it has to be done in the right place for the right reasons. But nevertheless, it is always something that you could do to just keep traffic completely out of an area. Other things that we could talk about, this is more on the pedestrian movement side of things. So you have pedestrian controlled signals like the ones that we have in our downtown. Signal timing is something that you can look at, in particular leading pedestrian signals or automatic pedestrian signals. A lot of intersections in Southeast Michigan, if you don't hit that little thing that chirps at you, you will not get a walk signal. And you have to kind of guess, oh, well, it looks like it's red, so I guess I can go. I don't actually think that that should exist. I think that you should always get the walk signal. And it's safest if the walk signal comes on before any of the lights turn green. So people can get out into the intersection and vehicles can see that they're there and adjust their motions accordingly. No right on red is also something that can help, because being able to go right on red injects confusion for everybody, including the person who's looking to go right on red, right? It's a flow thing, right? Because we have historically just prioritized the flow of vehicles through wherever they're driving. But if you can go right on red, well, do the people across the intersection have a green arrow coming at some point? Are you going to be trying to turn when they're turning? Is someone going to step out into the intersection because they think that they're about to get a walk signal and you're already halfway into it? Right on red is actually pretty dangerous. And a lot of accidents do occur when people are trying to take rights on red. So that's another thing that you could think about controlling, or at least at certain times of day. You know, when your most traveled times of day, it's pretty common to see no right on red 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or something. But if it's the middle of the night, well, fine. Okay, there's nobody around. So those are all things that you can look at that don't really involve a lot of physical changes, but they might involve electronic changes or signage.
Especially in a pedestrian area. I have
Right.
to say, yeah.
Right. And finally, just reducing overall traffic volumes actually does have a calming effect in and of itself on the people driving the cars. Because when we are in traffic, we get agitated very easily. Just speaking for myself, I am never at my best when I'm driving. You tend to leap to conclusions about other people that you would not otherwise leap to about them if you were passing them in a grocery store aisle or something. Just no one's at their best when they're driving. You tend to be at your worst, really, because especially when you're in heavy traffic. And we tend to forget too that to other drivers, we're the traffic, right? There's a famous quote, I'm trying to remember who said it. But it basically is just, you're not stuck in traffic, you are traffic. And it's something that I think we all should keep in mind every now and then. It's just that, okay, all right, this person's in front of me, but I'm in front of someone else. But less traffic generally leads to less agitation. So if we create ways for people to get around that don't involve getting in their cars, we can take away some of that volume and we can hopefully reduce people's blood pressure over the long term. And that is that.
So Joe, that means you're gonna start riding your bike here, right?
I've ridden my bike to Clawson
Yeah.
before. I've ridden
You
it to
realize how many sidewalks don't
Yeah.
exist, right? When you do
just crossing Woodward Avenue is
Yeah.
so aggravating. I run most of my errands on a bike on the weekend, and I go to the Trader Joe's and PetSmart over there
Oh,
at
that's terrible.
Catalpa, and
Been, yeah, coming in and out, just driving along Woodward is actually terrifying on a bike.
Yeah, it's not fun, but yeah, I ride my bike to Royal Oak and Ferndale and Clawson and Birmingham from Berkeley. And Beverly Hills and a couple other places.
So do you like bike lanes? Is that too personal of a question?
I do. I like them personally. I'm a bolder rider than most people.
Yeah,
So we have, and this is some information I can provide to you at the next meeting, about complete streets. We have, a discomfort scale. So there's basically certain levels of comfort that different people need to feel like they can ride on a road, right? And for some people, that means that I'm nowhere near cars. I have to be on a separated path or I'm not going there. So these are people who you will see riding on a sidewalk because they just don't feel comfortable being on the road. You know, I mean, it's fine. It's kind of partly what the sidewalk is there for, right? But you know, generally speaking, you hope that you're saving the sidewalk for people who are walking. But then the most comfortable riders, well, that's a guy in Lycra who's, you know, riding 20 something miles an hour on his speed bike, and he's going to go on whatever road he feels like going on, and you just go around him. So there's a real continuum of people, and you know, their levels of comfort, you know, that they need might change from day to day or depending on who they're with. If I'm with my kid, I'm on the sidewalk, you know, but if I'm by myself and I'm not on a mile road or something, you know, I'm on the street.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's there's a lot to think about there, but I'll provide some information at the next meeting
Okay.
on that. Any other thoughts?
So I think this was great information. I appreciate it. So we talked about like an action item being identifying areas of opportunity. We can do this throughout Clawson.
Exactly.
And kind of tying that with what options might work best.
Mhm.
So how do we go about doing that? As like an action item for us? Is that a takeaway? Something that you guys could do like the map view like you did for the survey? Or is that a discussion for next time? Because I'm already getting
Right, yeah.
today, but
Yeah, exactly.
what do we do with this?
Yeah, I think that is kind of what we do with it. We will move to a location identification stage next, where we as a group can, and we've got actually some input already on the map. We have 147 people have filled out at least some part of the survey to this point. Obviously, we'd like to get that number up, but that's the number that we're at right now. And I think something like 447 people have looked at it.
And when is it up until? I forget. Sorry.
We don't have a close date yet. We're gonna put a couple other pushes on to get more people to fill it out. But because we want just as much as we can get on there. But yeah, we do have some stuff on the map already. It's been good information so far, and hopefully we'll have enough that we'll be able to share it with you next time. I think we'll probably start outputting that data soon. And even if we don't have the survey closed by next time, we'll kind of show you where it is, where we stand, and what people are saying.
Yeah, if we're gonna talk about the survey too, I definitely want to go back to a lot of what we talked about originally, which was where are we at with like paper surveys, you know, for all the core, like the library and the school. But also, I think we talked about doing like QR codes and having those available at local businesses. I mean, ideally, putting them in people's mailboxes would be great. I'm not sure if that's something we could do, but just different
If
pushes
they're
around-
mailed with something else, yeah.
Yeah, just for putting like, you know, the word out just a little bit further.
Yep.
Um,
And we do have some of that going already. The paper ones with this platform were really, we basically had to make a paper survey, which is with the same questions. But yeah, that's something
another
that'll be in
option
Nixon
too, I don't know if we have
soon.
the ability, but you know, a tablet at some of those same buildings, like so.
Sure.
And is
Showing
it-
showing other
sorry.
members of society how to use that aren't on social media, saying that like link
Right.
them up.
Yeah, the library in particular, I think could probably support that. Yeah.
Well, and is there a way to share the PDF version so that like, I know there's certain people in the community that might have an elderly, someone
That is something we can do. Yeah.
Yeah, so is there a way we can have that kind of accessible to residents, like print here or? I don't know, I mean,
Sure.
okay,
to the original point, is there an action item that we on this commission should do for next meeting? Or are we expecting that we're gonna just take the input? Because I don't think there's anything directed toward, there's areas of opportunity in terms of, where there's, I know you had those little markers in terms of water breaks or like, things like that, but for traffic calming specifically, do we want to have a specific action item so it doesn't just get kind of lost? 'Cause that's what I'm afraid. We're gonna do these kind of conversations that are really beneficial, and then if we don't have an action item, they'll kind of get lost in the shuffle of everything else.
I think it might be most useful for us to send you a map that you can use.
Yeah,
And then I think it
To
might
mark
be
up.
helpful too, to know what DDA is planning on. Because I think they're kind of planning on doing a traffic softening and 14 mile, right, Joe?
Yeah, yes, exactly. They're studying that.
And like how far that might go down 14 on either side kind of thing. Before I did an action item, I would want to know that so that we can know how that might affect other areas, right?
yeah. And my whole goal with the master plan is like not to replicate work that's already been done. Make sure we have all the information that's already been collected and then put actual action items. So, we talk about so much information at times. I'm afraid that not all of it will make it in, right?
Sure, yeah,
I
yeah.
appreciate if you guys help kind of like bring that together. And I just want to make sure that this body is helping with that process as well. And not just assuming you guys are taking it away and then hopefully we'll have it when we see a draft sometime.
Sure, yeah, no, that's completely reasonable. Yeah, I think the best thing for us to do would be to get you a map and this presentation so that you can reference the presentation and then kind of think about the map. And, if you have to focus on your area because that's just what you're most familiar with, that's totally fine. Like, don't feel like you got to do the whole city. Because nobody has to do the whole city, as a group that will get there. So, do what you're comfortable with.
Can I don't want to overcomplicate things, but I tend to do that, so sorry. Would it be beneficial to look at this alongside of a parking study or just an idea of where DDA finds parking? If that were an avenue that we were thinking of taking, of softening through the parking on street, is that something that maybe we can kind of slip in our info as well?
Yeah, we have the
So we can
DDA
kind of-
parking study that Rich and Associates did a couple years ago.
I remember hearing about, and I don't know, I forget what areas they kind of identified. Can that just kind of be part of the info that we're given? I don't know if that everybody else agrees with that as being helpful.
To further complicate it, what about also crash history, traffic incidents, things like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, we went over a lot of different scenarios, but like, is there any like data-driven opinions by, I don't know, an outside firm or anything that we can have?
Mhm. Yeah,
Some of them are probably, not realistic, but.
sure. Yeah, so we're just making.
And
notes
we
about-
have traffic studies, right? Like those are fairly easy to get. I don't know about crashes. I know about flow. But like SEMCOG probably has something like that we can access, isn't there?
Yeah, SEMCOG has all kinds of information about, well, they've got traffic volume information in the form of average annual daily trips. They have very detailed crash information. We're usually able to identify, the 5 worst intersections in town or something like that.
And those are simply just intersections, right?
Typically, well, it does stretches of roads too, but
Okay.
most of the accidents happen at least in the close proximity to an intersection.
Or even our own law enforcement could advise on, where they see all the speeding, where they give the most. speed.
Sure, yeah, right, yeah, well, that's simple enough to ask.
And are we determining how much of the stretch of 14 or Main Street that we're trying to calm too? Or is that still?
Well, I mean, I think that anything is fair game. I think we can think about, obviously the DDA is gonna kind of be in the lead on that stretch of 14 mile, between Washington and Florence. But the rest of 14 mile, we can definitely think about too, if there are particular areas that we think are problematic or could use some kind of work, then we should definitely identify them and think about what the goal is there.
I mean, I just want to avoid, the same kind of bottleneck situation where people just rush into and then rush right out of.
Right.
It really doesn't solve any problems. It just, changes the problem.
Sure. Yeah. Because at both ends of the bottleneck, you get
Right.
that kind of like mad dash.
Right.
People are like, I'm free. And then they take off, slam the gas.
So, DDA is only doing 14-mile Florence to Washington, you said?
That's what they're looking at. That's the stretch.
Well, and
they're
I
looking
think
at.
that our job is to kind of look ahead of that and think about what's gonna happen in our neighborhoods because of that, because there are gonna be people that are going to be cutting. And I think we kind of have to account for how do we soften those thoroughfares that are lying within that district,
Mhm.
in my opinion. Yes, there's always gonna be speeders in the neighborhood. People will always have speeders, but like, I think to try to get ahead of things, we should probably really consider what's gonna happen there, because that's gonna be a big change that we're all gonna have to kind of account for, right?
Mhm.
Because otherwise, like, if we're not adding a benefit of parking on our main streets, then what's the point of softening traffic? I mean, like, I hate to sound,
Well,
Silly, but-
the concept that the DDA is exploring is diagonal parking,
and
which would like more than
think-
double the amount of parking in the
Okay,
downtown.
well, and that's great. That's great. And I think it's gonna add to the capture what the DDA is trying to do down there, right?
Yeah.
But what are we trying to do in the broader city? I think we kind of have to counteract and anticipate what that might do to neighborhoods, south, north, east,
Sure.
west of that.
And consider future growth as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, did you get the information you were looking for or seeking?
Yeah. I mean, definitely. And when we've got some ideas for what to do for next time in prep. So we'll get the map out as soon as we possibly can to everybody so that and this presentation so that people can start thinking about whatever part of the city that they're most comfortable thinking about.
Okay, so then earlier we did the master plan infrastructure, that's done. Was this considered master plan updates? Was that what you?
Yeah, I included the note that was shared with the DDA for you, the memo. So if you had any questions on that, we could always address them through the timeline in there as well. But I didn't have anything specific to say about it this evening.
I'll email you guys again, because I took the surveys on PC and mobile,
Mhm.
just if there's any kind of like weird things I noticed, so.
Sure. Did you notice anything weird on mobile? I haven't taken it on mobile personally, so,
No, I mean, some drag and drop stuff,
okay.
I had a hard time with assigning values to like the goals and things like that,
Okay.
because earlier you were moving the point system for where would you spend the money
Mhm.
if you had to. And then when you had a point system on, I think it was 0 to 5 being most important,
Sure.
there was no drag and drop option. It was like, so there's some weird.
Oh,
I
okay,
outlined
okay.
A bunch that I just noticed that. if
Yeah, go
there's
ahead and
tweaks
send
you
it
guys
to
can
us.
make To it live. I don't want to like mess up any trending or anything you got going on. but
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, send us what you got. Yeah, I appreciate that you did that.
Okay, so we've completed master plan updates. Take that off and let's move on to other business. And other business, I'm gonna attempt to do something here that I've never done before. I'm gonna attempt to make a motion. But before I make a motion, I'm gonna have to explain myself, the background, because a lot of you don't know what the background of it is. I was really upset when we lost our right to have the temporary certificate of occupancy. We used to have that. And when we had that, we had enforcement with it. If somebody wasn't doing what they were told to do or asked to do, we had some amount of control over it. That has been taken away from us and that's been given to the building department at this point in time. And I've said this before, I think 2 or 3 times, some of you have been here before. And when someone comes in here and they get a site plan from us, we approve it with conditions. Sometimes it's 3, 4, 5 different things that they have to do, that they have to accomplish before we sign off on the site plan. And once they walk out that door, we don't see them again quite often. So the problem is, from my perspective, is that we forget. I keep paperwork at home. I look at it all the time and I keep track of things, but it's easy to forget these things. That they just go away. And if the building department and administration don't enforce this, it just goes by the sideway. So there's a couple of different things in town going on. The main thing I'm looking forward to on my motion is we've got a business in town that's been, they had their grand opening in November 11th, 2021. And they have absolutely no site plan approval. They have no temporary certificate of occupancy. They have absolutely no paperwork whatsoever. And I've been after this. I usually discuss a lot of this behind the scenes. I don't want to embarrass the business in front of everybody and I don't want to get involved. So I try to get it done through administration. And in January 24th, under the minutes of our PC meeting, under the legal update, it was quote said that they would attend our next meeting. They did not. So I had 4 or 5 discussions with our city attorney, Rennis Nushai. Rennis, I'm working on it, I'm working on it. He keeps putting me off. His last comment was take it up with the city manager. So I took it up with the city manager and then he passes the buck to our assistant city manager. And I'm getting no response here. On today's paperwork, it says here 288 West 14 Mile, quote, ongoing review of the TCO status with the administration. It's been saying that for months. We're getting nowhere with this. I'm getting no responses to it. So I've looked up different sections of certificate of occupancy, non-compliance, the requirements of a certificate of occupancy, and a show cause hearing. And we, on the planning commission, have the ability to call a show cause. It's usually done by the building department, but we have the same power to do that. So I'm sure some of you are aware of the problem going on, so I don't know if that clear enough. I'll answer any questions you have, but my motion, I will make the motion, and let me see if I get some support and see how you people feel about this. My motion would be to direct the administration to issue a citation to show cause 288 West 14 Mile due to the lack of compliance to the site plan. And we would have to set a time and a date for that. My preference would be at our next meeting, but we'll see how that plays out. That's my motion. Would anybody want?
I'll support it.
I have a motion to support. Anybody want to carry on conversation?
Yeah, so now we can have discussion.
We can discuss.
Okay, so show cause, can you just define, so they need to update us on what was outstanding, what progress has been made? Is that what you're looking for? Like, what would be what happens during that show cause that you mentioned?
There's show cause because they haven't complied, they don't have a site plan. And when they took over the building, the people that were there before had a site plan, but they only completed half of it.
Mhm.
The new owners have to complete the second half, but it's not that big of a project from my perspective. But if we show cause them, they have to come in here and tell us why they're not doing it.
So they have a list of what was outstanding.
They have an
And they have
outstanding,
to address each point.
right?
Okay.
And you said citation, does that mean that they're fined in any way on that show cause?
I don't think they're fine for show cause. They have to be here once it's set up. Section 6.3 says, okay, the building department may issue a citation for correction or a show cause order requiring the applicant, owner, occupant to appear at a particular time and date before the planning commission to then and there show cause why sanctions should not issue as provided herein.
Okay,
We may issue a sanction against them. I'm not anti-business, trust me on this one. I want business in town. The bottom line of this is that we may issue a citation, an order declaring the property be vacated. So we could theoretically close the business down. That's not my goal here. I did the same thing when I discussed the Church of Claus. I'm not
Right.
anti-church, you know,
Right.
so I don't want to get taken on that one. But I think it's to me, it's their problem to come in front of us to discuss this. I simply want them to come up here and explain what the problem is. But also, I think it falls on our administration. We have a fellow here in town. I got his name here someplace. Brian Vargason. I don't know if any of you have met him. He is our building official. I've seen his picture on the thing. I've asked a couple times to have him come to our meetings. He's the building official. He's probably the guy that issues these. I've never met him in life.
Have you spoke with him?
I've never spoke with him. I never met him.
Can I ask what exactly is a show cause? I mean,
It's show cause, it forces them to come in front of us
okay,
because we have the power to shut them down. Right?
Well, essentially, what you're looking to accomplish is say, hey, here's the site plan. You promised to kind of complete this within, I don't know how much time she had when she took over the property. She had a certain amount of time to rectify and make good on that. Essentially, you just want her to come in front of us and say, hey, we're here.
Right.
We actually have kind of authority on the, the site plan that you're kind of working on. Nice to meet you.
You can run a business if we approve your site plan, or if you're not quite up to speed, you can get a temporary certificate of occupancy, and that is only good for, I think, 8 months. It's not supposed to be renewable. However, they've been extended again and again and again. So I think that kind of falls on our city administration. My fear is, like I said earlier, once the person walks out that door, we have very little contact with them anymore.
Yeah, I don't want to hurt or hinder the business. I don't.
Nor
think
do
you
I.
Either.
Nor do
So,
I.
But I recall you bringing this up multiple times, and I'm not opposed to enforcing what power we have to at least get an update, which sounds like what you're trying to do.
Right, just come in and talk to us.
Well, and do we have an opportunity at that time to revise a site plan or put forth a new site plan? If the things there are happening are literally striping the parking lot and they're not health and safety or related to like the integrity of a building or a parking lot or our residents or pedestrians, then I'm okay with like kind of getting.
That's a discussion we'll have to have when Tribal Fair was in there. Like I said, they only that's the first time I ever split a site plan. We gave them part A, part B. They completed part A. That was done. Now, as far as I was concerned, the new people coming in, I'm really gonna hold them liable to part B,
Right,
but they're not coming in to even discuss it.
right. And that needs to be a part of the transfer is at least we have eyes on what things didn't happen and what things should, or if they need to happen in order for that to happen. Because it really could be a health safety issue. I agree with you. And I think it's part of our diligence as planning commission to follow through with that.
Yeah, like I said, it's been open since November 11th of 2021 with absolutely no paperwork, legal paperwork to be there. So that's all I want to do is.
so is there not a approved site plan right now, or is there actions that need to be taken
Far as
for the
I-
site plan?
As far as I know, there is no site
The
plan.
site plan
approved.
expires.
So was there was there a bond required for the
That-
TCO?
Well, there was
No,
not
I
a
don't
TCO
believe it
issue,
was-
Right, is that what you're saying?
It was, but I don't think we were requiring bonds back. I might be misspeaking, but I don't think we were.
Might be. I've heard rumors that to that effect by our city attorney, and I'm getting.
Because essentially that's what the bond's for.
Mhm.
Yes.
It was one.
But do we want to give somebody just hold a bond and just let them continue business as usual and not update?
Well, the bond would be
No, this
to
would
do the
we'd
work.
Still call them, but we need to actually, we would hold them accountable.
Well, yeah, the original idea of a bond is that if they're not doing the work, we take the money that's gonna take to do it. And then if they don't do it in a timely manner, whatever time we allow to them, then we take that money and we do it. I don't know if the city of Clausen's ever done that. I think it's a threat that I don't think we ever follow through on. But all I simply want to do, and thank you for the motion in the second, is to have the person come in here and talk to us.
Well, I support that with the knowledge of, I don't necessarily, I haven't read our bylaws and
Mhm.
so I don't know what authority was taken and what we have. But if it's within our parameters and it's within our authority and I trust that you've studied that, I do support that.
It most certainly is. I don't take legal advice lightly, especially from our city attorney. When I asked him, how do I go about applying for a show cause? He directed me to our city, Gibbles and Webster, and that's not the answer.
So
I
to
expected.
clarify that, you did ask the city attorney about this
Several times.
and he didn't give direction whether this is.
He told me to talk to the planning company, and I think, no, the planning company is the planning company. You are the city attorney. And the last time I talked to him, which is
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're not gonna,
It was a council meeting a while back. I've approached him several times on this subject. And the last time I approached him, I told him, I says, if nothing shows up on my next agenda, I says, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna ask for a vote on a show cause. And he says, do what you want to do.
as long as he said, yeah, there's no,
And I made the city manager and the assistant city manager aware that evening that that was my intention. So here it is, and it's come to fruition for me. We have a motion. I think we should probably try to set a time and a date on this.
What's the ramifications if they don't show up to the show cause?
and also I think we're at 10 o'clock too.
That would be a citation then, wouldn't it? According to that, wouldn't a citation be issued if,
Right.
I just asked because they already ignored you once or twice, right?
we,
Or they-
well, not us, we haven't acted through our authority yet, right?
The building hasn't ignored it. From my perspective, the city administration is not following through.
Gotcha.
So I'm trying to push both sides
Yeah.
against the end here and see what we can come up with. So if there's any possible way that we could schedule this for our next planning commission meeting, I would think it'd be wonderful.
Are you amending your,
No, I'm just looking for a time and date.
oh,
So I'm in the process of communicating with her, and Commissioner Someone did bring that up. It is 10 o'clock. I'll make this quick, then you guys can vote to extend the meeting. In the process of communicating with her and hoping to have something before the next planning commission meeting. So I don't want to hinder you from making your motion, but I would ask if you guys would not make that for the next planning commission meeting, but the first meeting in October. And that way, if there is a resolution by that next planning commission meeting, we can present it to you then. And if not, you can have your show cause on that planning commission meeting in October.
This has been dragging on for so long. I would prefer to have it our next scheduled meeting. It's not going to take that long. They come in, we have a short discussion and done deal.
it's 10. Can I just make a motion to extend? What do you want? 10 minutes, 15
Right.
minutes? Yeah.
Yeah.
Who-
We all
who's-
agreed and we can extend for 10 minutes tonight.
Just to be up. Yeah.
All right, I'll make a motion to extend our meeting until
We're good.
10:10.
Support.
We're good.
I got it. I don't
Okay.
think anyone was saying no. Yeah.
We all said yes.
So would you feel okay with amending it to be not next meeting, but the following meeting, Greg? Or are you feeling like,
I can, but I have the feeling I've been put off for so long, and I don't see any reason that
I do feel like we're gonna kind of want to see her either way.
you're talking 2 weeks from now. They get notified, they have 2 weeks to get their paperwork together or get their program together and come in and talk to us. Obviously, they've been talking to the city since 2021 and they're getting nowhere. So.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the direction of where we're going. I think I do have a question or a concern more on, I say on the administration side. Because I've been staring at the same update as you have for the past couple of years, but there's been nothing and no communication on it. I'm more concerned that the administration between the city manager, the city attorney are kind of giving you the runaround, giving us the runaround on answers. I fear or am concerned about using this authority and forcing the business in front of us when it seems that when there is communication, because this administration is saying that there is communication, but administration is just not sharing any of it with us.
I see your point. There is communication apparently, but there's actually no activity taken.
So you feel
Well,
like,
I don't know that, right?
Yeah.
We don't know that either.
Right,
so,
I know.
right.
so can I put words in your mouth real quick? You're essentially saying like, we're looking for results in the wrong person. Right? From her, when the administration should be sharing things more with us.
Right.
Right.
I disagree. We're not punishing the business.
She might not know though.
I can't find any, she can't find any way.
Come in here and talk to us. Okay, she's talked to the administration. Come in here, talk to us.
Yeah, but I believe I'm with you on this, where I don't think it could be something non-intentional where she's just speaking to administration and she doesn't know that we're sitting here like, hey,
Could be,
hi.
we can
Yeah.
talk about that when she comes in. The catch is, I can't show cause the city manager, the assistant
Right.
city manager and our city attorney. I can't force them
For
to come
sure.
in here and tell us what's going on. This is the only option that I have to find out.
Right.
So I'm gonna hold the date as our next regularly scheduled meeting. Let's make sure that gets put on the agenda,
So you're amending your motion.
not amending, I'm just adding a date to next meeting, or next. I don't want to put this off for another month. Wherever our next scheduled meeting is. It should be someplace, I don't have it in front of me,
Be the 26th.
September 26th, yeah.
September 26th.
Nick, can you give me a little bit more on what you feel like you'll have resolved by that meeting?
So, and I used this word earlier, and I think you guys are gonna not love the word, but you know, it is a complex situation. The fact that this is something that we inherited, and you were right how it was a very unique situation where they had site plan A and site plan B. I think we learned we're not going to do that again, right? It is something that we've fixed our ordinances when it comes to temporary certificates of occupancy to require bonds. So if work isn't done, that we are able to do it. And I know you shared that it's in the city hasn't done it. We haven't done it because we haven't been in a position to do it because that wasn't in place previously. Every other TCO that we've had since then has since been completed. We've collected a bond. And just on that point, there is one that says there's a TCO open. That TCO is closed. They have a full CVO. That's 1000 North Crooks. So just want to pass it along there. Specifically here. And again, this is something that we inherited an issue. It's been trying to find the facts in between, there's two sides to every story. Should it have taken this long? No, I'm not going to sit here and say that. I would not argue that at all. But there's a lot of details that are part of the story that we're trying to patch together.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, well, her due diligence as a buyer is her due diligence as a buyer. And I hate to sound harsh, but that's just what she has to do as a buyer. And then what do we anticipate will be in front of us next meeting? Because Greg is saying he doesn't want to change the date. So I'm either going to vote yes or no. I'm wondering what you feel like you can bring to the next meeting that might satisfy the body and where we're kind of at right now.
Not about Nick bringing something. It's-
Well, I know, and I hate to put it all on you, but I'm saying you feel like you'll have something for our next meeting, so you want us to wait an additional meeting. I'm wondering what you feel like, I know you can't give me what I'm gonna have, but do you feel like we'll feel confident and settled? Or do you feel like it's gonna be, well, we gotta have more time? Where are we at in terms of?
I mean, I would say yes, but I don't know if you guys are going to accept that answer. And so I think that there's a potential path forward, but you've made your motion and
From my perspective, I think it's fairly easy for them to just bring in part B of the existing site plan. The part A has been agreed upon by this commission for a long time ago. Part A is fine. Part B was never completed. So I think just bring in part B, show us that, we'll look at that. And I don't think we have to go through a really lengthy thing with it. We just have to do the things that were required of getting a full site plan. That's all. I'm not trying to be anti-business. Don't get me wrong there. We would not treat any other business in town like this. That's not the way we treat people. But I have the feeling when once they, like I said, when they walk out that door, we lose control. And I don't like that. I don't like that feeling. I have a motion. I have support. Can I have roll call, please?
Can I ask one more question?
Oh, sure.
Sorry. Just for the business being informed of the show cause. Is there action we need them to take when they come to our next meeting? And is there anything that we as a body will be approving or denying, or it's just to get information? Can you just clarify that? I'm trying to remember, understand that piece. So one, clarifying for the business owner what they should be prepared to discuss when they're with us, and that'll be on the record, right?
Right.
And two, for us, what are we trying to accomplish, or is it just information?
We're trying to complete a site plan approval for that
So
building.
we will we'll have a site plan approval as
Right.
part of the next agenda as well.
It doesn't have one now, and that's what it needs. It needs a site plan
So
approval.
essentially, they're gonna come in front of us with the site plan that we would be approving?
Like I
that
said,
probably won't be likely for the next meeting, just based on how long it takes to create a site plan.
like I said, just part B of what was existing before.
So there's a plan B already out there that
Tribal Fair was in
We'll
there.
have in our packet that we
Yeah.
can point to and then ask questions about.
When Tribal Fair was there, they completed part A, they completed that completely. Then they sold the building without doing part B, so it doesn't really have an approved site plan. From my perspective, so if they come in with part B of what Tribal Fair left on the plate. And if they agree to do part B, then we will give them a site plan approval.
Just so everyone's aware, it's 10:09.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Can I have,
So just to be clear, there is a site plan out there. It just hasn't been approved yet by
It was
engineering
approved.
department, building department, and
The-
this body.
The
right?
issues revolve around engineering of the parking lot.
Okay.
It was approved at one time. It expired
half the site plan,
because that was in 2021 that it was approved.
one half the site plan.
And they've never.
Yeah,
come back.
they had an,
It's for hand.
they had an approved phase two, and that would have been inherited by the new property owner, but it would have since expired. Yeah.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, and
There's no additional work for that. They can bring part 2 in as is.
Yeah.
So there's no reason.
They
couldn't do an extra.
could, but some physical work has been done, and as Nick said, engineering is a big part of the problem with that physical work that was done.
And the zoning of the property has been part of the issue as well as, residential, commercial and how it's allowed for both.
Right.
It's a house being used as commercial. And so I don't know if they'll have a site plan in front of you guys.
I think we have to extend the meeting.
Pardon?
We gotta extend again. Can I, it's
No.
10:10. Do we have to
Oh, we'll
extend
extend
again?
time?
Yeah,
Give us another 10 minutes.
all right. Motion to extend to
We'll have
20.
10 minutes. Okay. I have a motion and I have support. Can I have a roll call?
Well, now I've got more questions in
Okay.
terms of, like, they came in front of us. I remember when they were trying to sell the home as a residential home, or no, they were trying to sell it as, I forget what they were trying to sell.
bought residential, we changed it to commercial for them.
And now
Then
they,
they couldn't sell it as commercial, so they
Right.
want to sell it as residential.
Yes.
They couldn't, so now it's sold as commercial again.
but it sold as a commercial property,
Yes, it-
not a residential. So she has to, I mean, like, so whether or not it's like a confusing zoning, what did she purchase the home? She purchased the home as a commercial. That's kind of her due diligence to like know the site stuff, right? Yeah, I mean. Okay, I just needed that clarification.
Can we
Thank
get,
you.
can we get roll call now so I can get this on
Yes.
the paperwork?
Yeah.
Very good.
I'm good. Roll call, please.
Mr. Fitzer,
No.
Mr. Colbert,
Yeah.
Mr. Cusero, Ms. Redmond,
Yes,
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Twidell,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter.
Yes.
All right, motion carries.
Thank you. Like I said, I'm not trying to be business unfriendly here. I'm just trying to make sure that we're.
before you go into before you leave other business, I have two things real quick. One,
Okay.
just to make sure everybody's legit. Did everybody already swear in and stuff? Like,
Yes.
not trying to be that. Okay, cool.
Yes.
And then two, where are we at on the short-term rental stuff? I feel like that just kind of fell out, and I know we're working on master plan, but I thought we were gonna kind of rotate those things in. Did I miss something? Short-term rental ordinance now is not full and essentially kind of able to do whatever. Are we kind of, have we gotten an update on that or no? On completing that?
Yeah, I did have a conversation with the attorney about this last month. And we're working on bringing that back to you. It might be ready for next meeting, actually. Yeah, we are gonna bring that back to you.
Okay.
But yeah, we talked about it last month.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Another minor thing under other business, as I say, once things go out the door, if we don't watch them, they get away from us. I asked at our meeting a month ago about the rooftop screening at Biscuits and Gravy. And trust me, I love the place. I've eaten it 4 or 5 times, like the brothers that own it. Good business, good everything. I just noticed that it looks like a couple bicycle racks up on the roof, and I was quite sure on our site plan that that's part of the site plan, screen off the air conditioning units. And I was told I'm correct on that. But if I didn't see it, say it, it's already been signed off on. They don't have a temporary anymore. They have a full site plan approval. even though that's not part of it. Correct?
So they are going to be applying for a site plan amendment to try and add some parking there. So we'll be able to discuss that at that point. So they're partially applied, we'll call it right now. And so they'll hopefully be on our agenda soon. So that's something we can address at that time.
Okay, that's gonna be on my radar too. I just.
Yeah, but
watch.
is there a way that we're correcting the slip? Mistakes happen, right? But is there a way that we're correcting the slip in administration on like,
I think what they had was a lower end device to screen the wall and then it broke and it was never repaired. And so it would likely fall into code enforcement issue that hasn't happened, but with the site plan amendment, knowing it's coming up, we'll just have it addressed then.
okay, so someone did go verify it was there at one point in time and then it broke.
As far as I know, yes, I
Okay.
remember seeing it up there at my walks through to downtown. So yes.
Okay,
Yeah, that doesn't bother me as much as long as we, we have eyes on it, that's all. And I see it every time I walk by here. Okay, are we finished with other business? I am, we are. Planners report,
Joe doesn't have anything.
no planners report. Staff report and training opportunities.
So just, I don't want to backtrack too much, but when it comes to the master plan survey, waiting on to get a printable copy for the survey to have at our locations, which hoping to have this week. Each location, City Hall, DPW, Parks and Rec, and the library currently have the flyer with the QR code there, as well as I said City Hall. So we have a couple here, and then we'll also have the hard copies available once they're ready. The next citywide event is Claws and Paws, which is on September 23rd at the park at 10 a.m. I intend on being there for that entire event, and we'll look on getting a table there. So I've got to get a couple items to you guys. So in that email, I'll probably throw on that date, see if anyone's available and wants to attend for the entire time, partial of it. And if you don't know what Claws and Paws is, it's an event held by the Chamber of Commerce for dog walking and supports the chamber and the adoption of dogs and cats. So I will be there. I'll have that in the information for the master plan survey to see if anyone wants to attend that.
I'll be there, but I'll be cooking hot dogs though.
Okay.
hot dogs.
We'll give you a QR code to wear on your shirt.
Sadistic at that point. Nick, are you gonna be there with a table as the city of Clausen building planning?
Also, kind of just getting this, I was gonna be there regardless, but I'm thinking we'll just have a table there with master plan related items, survey stuff. So if I'm the only one there out of the planning commission myself, I'm fine being there. I might, and if there's some of you there, I'll probably just walk around with my dog and whatnot, but wanted to give you guys the opportunity to attend that.
Cool. And can you email us the hard copy as well, just so we,
Yeah, and again, once that's in our hands, most certainly.
Cool.
What else was there? It was mentioned earlier, but the wall at the Social Security office. I spoke to someone recently and they were inquiring about repairing the wall, and so they'll be pulling a permit soon to have that repaired. Again, they were just waiting on insurance to figure out the claims and whatnot, and that can sometimes be a mess, specifically projects like that.
While they're there, have them look at the lights up in the front parking lot. They look like the traffic lights with little domes on top.
Mhm.
One's been teetering for a long time. Looks like it's gonna fall off at any point in time.
Okay.
So it's kind of a safety thing. I know one of the business owners up there has been complaining about it for a long time.
Yeah, can do that. And then the rest of the staff report was in the packet. And so if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I don't, anybody else?
we
Okay,
appreciate you, Nick, even though you see the front of us.
I'm happy to be here.
We appreciate you.
Seeing no lawyer here tonight, that means we have no legal update. And so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Motion support, roll call.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Twidell, Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer,
Yes.
Mr. Colbert,
Yes.
Mr. Kucera,
Yes.
and Ms. Redmond. Almost forgot you. Sorry.
Jeez, I just got done appreciating you.
I know. I'm sorry. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Big lie.
Without carries out the, like,
Oh,
the
yeah,
show
yeah.
cause, that it's like,
Yeah, and the,
how's the process work now?